5, 6, we're all here.
Maureen in? Did you got her something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Hope, how
Hey,
are you
Maureen.
doing? You all ready to go?
Hi, I'm here. I'm just starting the YouTube.
Okay, let me know.
2 seconds. Yep, we're live.
Great.
It's awesome. It's 6:15. So thank you, everybody, for your attendance this evening. And we'll call the meeting to order. And we'll do the approval of the agenda. Late items, Hope, anything more than what you've published?
Nope. So just the items I sent around earlier today, and then the one additional item.
A little later today.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Thank you very much. So approval of the agenda.
Yes, I'll go.
Move.
Okay, thank you. I got Michael and Rob, and all in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Public comments, Hope, how are we doing there?
We have no public comment this evening.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move right into the consent agenda.
Oh, we've got Melissa online. Is she,
Well,
Melissa was going to speak, but she thinks that council has all the information they need regarding the collaborative project service agreement. And so she's just going to be available for questions, but
okay, that's great. Thank you, Melissa. So moving on to the consent agenda, does anybody have anything they're uncomfortable with or would like some more clarification on? Everybody's good? Allison, you're happy with that 3.3?
yeah, I would like to pull 3.5.
3.5, okay.
Councilor
Gary,
Nicholson has her hand up.
And Melissa?
Councilor Nicholson has her hand up.
Oh, Maureen. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Maureen.
Item 3.3, please.
Yeah.
Okay, 3.3.
I also raising my hand for 3.3, Gary.
Okay, sorry, David, which one would you like?
3.3, so
Oh, okay, for 3.3, okay. I'm just wondering if we can fit that in after Raj's presentation there, so.
We could add that to item.
It's after 7.1?
It's after 7.1, yes.
7.1B then? And that's 3.3. And the other one we'll just put in the normal section there, which is gonna be section 11. Yeah. All right. Move to approve as, move
Oh,
to.
Gary,
Yeah,
the transportation one, you might want to slot in after Emma's presentations.
okay.
Which is the transportation one?
3.5,
The minutes.
Okay, thank you.
okay. And Emma's last one. She's got a couple of them in here, right? Or just one? I guess Emma just has the one,
Under
which is 6.2.
5.3. After 5.3, is that what you're thinking?
Might mean 6.2, I don't know.
No, it's like
6.2 Traffic
6.2.
and Streets bylaw.
6.2, yeah, so we'll put 3.5 in there. All right, thank you. And move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
yeah, I'll move that.
I'll go. Okay, David, you go, and I'll second that. All in favor, aye.
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 All right.
Before we get going, just a reminder to use the handout function just when talking.
Yeah.
Would be great. Thank you.
You mean the digital hand, right?
The digital hand.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
All the meetings are a little different.
Yeah,
Mine
we're
anyway.
gonna have to change all these up. Okay, and we're gonna move right into delegations. We have none. Business arising from the minutes. Okay, development variance permit, DVP 05-2020 for 816 Valhalla Place. Emma Chow, Island Community Planner. I'll pass it right over to you, Emma. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I'm just going to try and share screen.
Okay,
And A lot of presentations open. DPO5. Okay, so staff is bringing back development variance permit application DVP 05 2020 for 816 Valhalla Lane for council's consideration. Just as a refresher, this application is for a property located in Queen Charlotte Heights on the east side of the island as shown here. And the application is for a small house addition to the north of the house, shaded in red. The addition is encroaching within the front setback, and it's asking for a reduction from 7.5 meters to 3 meters. And the addition is 1 story high, as shown shaded in red here on the front elevation of the house, the east elevation. And again here on the north elevation. I've also included the picture of the south side of the house, which does have a bit more area outside of the setback, but as you can see, the terrain is steeper, more difficult to build on, and also has challenges with connecting to the internal layout of the existing house.
Okay.
The back of the house, the rear west elevation, is very steep and not feasible for the addition. There were no submissions received during the public notice period, and as mentioned in my previous staff report, the internal referrals did not have any concerns, including from Public Works regarding the encroachment into the visibility setback along Valhalla Lane, or Valhalla Place, sorry. So staff recommends that council approves this development variance permit application DVP 05 2020. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Emma. So we've seen this before. I think that one of the main things on the discussion is it's just a continuation of the existing non-conforming line at the front end of the house anyway. So it's not really that really different than the rest of the house. I see we have no neighborhood submissions. Just don't drop any rocks down there because that's not a pleasant place for the rocks to go. Anybody have any more comments on this?
Councilor Morris has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just going
Councilor
in there now,
Fast.
sorry. So Allison first.
I
And
just
then,
wanted to remind everybody that there was a letter of support received from the Strata for this variance.
Okay, thank you. And Sue Ellen?
Yeah, I thought I remembered a letter as well. And I just want to reiterate that I think changes to the setback should be the same for everybody. So I just, I have a principled issue with allowing these variances one at a time. And is it, I guess I got a question for the planner. Is the 7.5 meters to 3 meters setback, is that the setback that everybody has from the front?
In the neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't have any survey plans of the surrounding neighbors, but they do appear similar. But I don't have a survey plan to say for sure.
Okay, I just, what I see, and I know in our official community plan, we've got, which is community values and the community participation over the years, we've got, that's where these setbacks come from through the land use bylaw. And they refer to areas so the houses don't get too close together. And so I also know of other objectives that have to do with diverse housing so that not all houses just get bigger and bigger. And I think we've got goals around affordable housing and things like that. Anyway, I don't know that it's in the public interest. It might be very well in the interest of these current landholders to do this, but I'm going to be voting not in favor.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. Maureen?
Thank you, Gary. And I'll be voting in support of this variance. And I have a question for the planning department. I wonder if it would be possible for council to be provided with a summary of all of the variance decisions that council has made in the last 3-4 years. I'm quite curious about the frequency with which, or the lack of frequency with which council has not supported a variance recommendation. I seem to remember at some point that there was a discussion regarding whether variance applications should come to council at all, or whether only variance applications that were flagged as extraordinary in some way should come to council. I would find it helpful to be provided with that information in terms of potential efficiencies.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. Allison?
Unmute myself here. Emma, did you say the required setback is 7.5 meters?
Yes,
Okay, so when these people built their house, because we were under zoning bylaw number 36, and at that point, the setback was 4.6 meters. So this is an issue for a lot of people with existing houses in that when we did the land use bylaw in 2002, we changed a whole bunch of the setbacks. So there's a whole ton of houses on the island that have setbacks that are would know, you know, if they went to get a building permit today, that wouldn't fit. So this is really, and it's as Gary says, it's just going along from the original line of the house, which would have had a building permit and been entirely within the setbacks when it was built.
Thank
yes,
you
the
for that.
existing setback is grandfathered.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I'm going to go to Daniel. I see he's got his hand up there. Maybe you want some clarification. Go ahead, Daniel. Then back to Rob.
Thank you, Gary. Just speaking to Maureen's question, I would just ask that maybe after addressing the variance question, maybe that could be a separate council motion. So we have it flagged as a priority to do that report.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel. Over to Rob.
Yeah, I'm going to be supporting this, but I think it falls within what we've been traditionally doing over the last couple of years, at least as long as I've been in council, which is a short time. But I just want to echo Councillor Fast's comment about maybe looking at how we coordinate a bit more of a coordinated approach to how we decide on variances, because it's basically been, we've been approving almost all of them, and I think it'd be good to look at them because as a whole, and maybe and I appreciate Maureen's comments as well. I think that'd be some useful information to have. So I'm hoping that we can maybe coordinate the approach a bit more and get an understanding of where the line is on variances as far as easy decisions and ones we have to think a bit harder about.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I think in summary here, I think these variances come at us because they're in a jam and they need some help. I can't remember one that we've turned down in 6 years personally, but I would like to get that data. So I'm just going to read the recommendation here, and the recommendation is, that the council issue development variance permit DVP 05-2020 for the variance of front setback for 816 Valhalla Place, legally described as SL20 Group 1 District Lot 2619 LMS 2199 BID 023264896. I'll move that.
I'll second it, Gary.
I'll second it.
Okay, I got David in there first. Thank you. And I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposition?
Me.
Sue
Okay,
Ellen.
thanks, Sue Ellen.
Ellen
So we have
passed.
one in opposition.
Perfect.
Thank you, and that does pass.
And then the second motion,
What have you got there, Hope? Anything?
yes, let me just pull it up,
Thank
sorry.
you.
That council directs staff to prepare a report outlining the history of development variance permits approved and rejected from council between 2017 and 2020.
Could we go back to 2016, and that would give us 2 years of the prior council and 2 years of this council,
Yep.
please?
Thank you, Maureen. That's a good addition. The more history we
I'll
have, the
move
better.
that.
I'll second
I'll
it.
second that one.
Yeah, several.
Okay,
of us.
thank you.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, no, and I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye. Okay, in
I think
opposition?
Councillor Morse has her hand up.
Question. Okay, sorry, Allison, I should have gone there. What have you got?
Well, I'm just not sure that this is a good use of staff's time. Unless Daniel can tell me that there's a list of, that he can easily push a button and out will come a whole
The
list of all the
DVPs.
DVPs. Because the people that apply for a DVP have a choice. They can go to the Board of Variance if it's a hardship issue, or they can come to council. And 9 times out of 10, they come to council, because I think when you come to council, the DVP gets registered on title on the property. And so there's no question 20 years from now, when somebody's lost all their records and it's 2 owners later, that there was a DVP. So,
Well, that's correct. And if you go to the Board of Variance, we've only had one in 6 years, Allison.
exactly.
You're right. They don't like it very much,
Yeah.
and it wasn't successful. Okay, Daniel, back to you. How long do you think this is going to take? I don't, if it's going to take more than about an hour of staff time, I don't want it to happen.
We do have a spreadsheet of
Yeah.
all our applications, and so most of the report would just be copying that over.
I don't-
providing some additional information, but I don't think it would be onerous.
Yeah, I
It
don't
does-
think, thank you for that. I don't think we need all the different ones and them all written down, what we just like. I think, Maureen, I don't know, to your point, because you advanced this, do you want a description of all of them or just a count?
Well, I'd like to know what the application title was.
Yeah, okay.
To be able to identify it. But I think to respond to Councillor Morse's point, there may be a bit of investment of time here, but it could potentially be a time saver in the
In the
long
long
run. And my understanding was that the last council made, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the last council made a decision to consider all variance applications at the council level. And that was a choice, and it did not necessarily need to be that. The variance applications could be considered at the staff level. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's my recollection.
Well, I think
Eric,
that
can
is
I
something.
answer that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
There's a difference between DPs and DVPs, and we
Correct.
did assign DPs to council, to staff, and made a decision to bring them back to council over a couple of contentious ones, and then passed another resolution by law amending it to put them back to staff. But I think with DVPs, and we'll have to check the Local Government Act, because there's the Board of Variance or council, I don't think council can delegate the DVP to staff.
Well, perhaps that could be part of the report that Daniel's preparing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go to David first.
Thanks, Gary. Maureen covered most of what I wanted to say. I'm looking
Okay.
for a way of finding some efficiency here. So I think, Rod, I'm not looking for the details of these things, but I think if Daniel could give us some ideas of how this could be streamlined, what would need to come to council and what would not need to come to council, and some rationale behind that. That's what I'd be looking for, because, yeah, it's kind of obvious. Thanks.
Well, if we could save some staff time in the long run, like Maureen says, I think we'd be much better off.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, David. Allison, anything else you got there?
No,
Okay, Daniel, can you just give us a quick summary of how long that would take, and if
great.
and we'll see what the resolution looks like. It's not on my board. Emma, go ahead.
Just to add a really quick point, Maureen, you had asked if we could also note whether or not the staff recommendation was followed. That we don't have in the spreadsheet, and that would be quite onerous to pull up each application to see.
I don't think there's too many where we didn't follow the staff report in the last 6 years that I know of. Anyway, thank you, Emma. Okay, I'm going to go back to Daniel. Did you want to just, are you
No.
happy with, well, let's see what the resolution looks like, Hope, and then we'll ask Daniel if he's okay.
Yeah, I can certainly read it again. The council
you.
directs staff to prepare a report outlining the history of development variance permits approved and rejected from council between 2016 and 2020.
All right, and what was the other thing we're gonna add in there?
Whether
Was
they
there-
could be delegated to staff.
Yeah, just to see if they could be delegated to staff and what that would look like.
Do you
David, are
want
you
that-
in again?
Do you want that in there, Daniel, or is it you're good if it's just in the minutes?
I mean, what I was going to say was in the Local Government Act, I don't believe they can be delegated. So we do delegate development permits, and I don't believe we can delegate development variance permits. But I was going to say, I think it is a good discussion for this council to have. Whenever we
Yes.
meet with people who are looking for variances, one of their first, and often, a driving question is, well, is council going to approve it? And basically our guide for that is pointing to past decisions. So we would look and try to say, okay, these are similar ones. So like one question for them is, well, would staff support it? And the second question is council going to support it? And we try to guide them to look at what council has decided in the past, but any discussion council has on, their overall philosophy on variances and what they want to see and not want to see come forward is helpful. And then we use that to help guide applicants when they're considering making an application or not.
Okay,
So
Okay.
I'll move the motion.
okay, thank you, Maureen. I'll second it.
it.
Okay. Somebody seconded. Now I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nope.
Nobody?
Allison's
Okay, thank you.
opposed.
Councillor
Yeah,
Morse.
I'm opposed, Mary.
You're opposed?
Yeah, I think it's a total waste of staff time.
Okay, but it might save a lot of staff time in the
Not
future.
if they can't delegate them.
No, I guess not.
Michael seconded that.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay.
Michael's seconded the
Oh,
motion.
David seconded the motion.
I'm not sure who did one.
I got it.
I think it was a
We're
Tom.
good.
Hope's
whose hand
got
that
it.
went
Don't
first.
worry about
We're
it.
good.
Hope's got
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to 5.2 after that discussion. Development variance permit DVP 06-2020, and that's for 321 Eagle Rock Lane. Drew Rose is the architect there. Emma Chow, back to you, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. This is going to be a similar presentation.
Yes.
DVP 06-2020 for 221 Eagle Rock Lane for council consideration. This is a map of the property location located in the Eagle Cliff neighborhood on the east side of the island. The property contains an existing house that is mostly within the required setbacks. These are grandfathered encroachments, and the applicant would like to build a cover porch that connects to the existing entry to the house. And it would entail an increase of the maximum allowed porch projection from 1.25 meters to 1.8 meters, as well as an increase in the maximum allowed roof overhang projection from 0.9 meters to 3.13 meters. And this is because the applicant would like to keep the porch centered over the existing entry, and any porch that is over this door will likely require a variance. As you can see, it's very close to the setback line. And the architect would like to maintain a conventional 90-degree design. 5 submissions were received during the public notice period, all in support. And in the previous staff report, internal referrals did not have any concerns, including from Public Works regarding the visibility setback along Eagle Rock Lane. So staff also recommends that council approve this development variance permit DVP 06-2020.
All right, thank you, Emma. Okay, any questions on this one? It's much the same as the last one. Nothing?
Yes, Sue Ellen has her hand up.
There we go. So Ellen, you're there now. I see you. Yep.
My my comments are similar to the last one. I used to
Okay.
live in Eagle Cliff, and over the years, I've been noticing that it's been the tree canopy has been decreasing. At the last meeting, we learned that some trees would be coming down. I don't know if they're public trees or if they're not. Maybe that's a question for the planner. But I think the point I want to make is that all these 1,000 cuts, these small variances, although I know Eagle Cliff and its history and how challenging the lots and the lot lines are, I think that we need to look at them through a climate lens, and there needs to be some long-term planning in terms of, I am concerned that Eagle Cliff is going to end up looking possibly like Caulfield or somewhere like that with very few trees. There are some neighborhoods on the island where if you're looking for the public access to water, you just look for the trees because all the other trees are gone. And I know that's not what this DVP is about, but at some point I would like to talk about the public sphere and the what options for the future might be removing by allowing variances into public setback. Where could a path go in the future, for example? Eagle Cliff was based on paths and trails at one time. And what about, is an aesthetic reason for wanting it at 45 degrees? Is that, I'll look forward to the report that's coming because I'm going, is that worth staff's time to approve a variance for an area that's really quite cliffy and rocky and has small, some very unique buildings and neighborhood character, concerned about keeping that long-term planning and community values about, are we rural or are we not? And these things are in our official community plan. And I'm also thinking about budget. This is because every time these natural spaces are, which is our public spaces are trimmed or trees are cut, which are often on the public right of way, it makes the stand or the remaining trees more vulnerable to wind and to drying out and all those things. So thinking about the future in terms of shade, in terms of moisture being needed to keep down wildfire, in terms of the budget when a tree does come down on public, from the public right of way onto private property, it's very expensive and it can be unsafe. So what are we doing to our remaining trees? Anyway, at some point, I think I would like to talk about maybe individual property owners, or the current property owner maybe can come up with a more creative suggestion and keep some of the neighborhood character in the forest in the neighborhood. And that's partly why I'll be voting against this motion. And at some point, I'd like to talk about tree retention in all the neighborhoods of Bowen, because I just see it getting thinner and thinner, and maybe another report would be valuable, or with input from the Environment and Climate Action. And I noticed this one, the Parks and Environment staff person did not review this application. I wonder what she would have to say. So, you know, some of those things I think are significant to the long-term planning rather than these little short one-off 1,000 cuts decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Allison?
I was just wondering, did I miss was Emma going to do a presentation?
She did.
It happened.
Sorry, I
Did
guess
you-
I was looking up the DVP thing. If
Okay.
I recall correctly, the trees he wants to cut down are on his property, right in front of his house, and I would consider them a fire hazard. And under fire smart principles, they should come down.
Sorry, but I have other information and I'll be happy to provide that. Big trees like that can be protective. So never mind.
Well, that's fine. You
But-
can have the burning branch drop on your house, and he chooses not to have it drop on his.
Okay,
Um,
that's far
As
enough
they
to go
go
on that.
from crown to crown.
Okay, let's not get into that part of it, please. Let's
Well,
just
yeah, but,
focus on the,
and if he paved the
I'm-
driveway, there would be no permeable surface and those trees wouldn't survive, so. Yeah, I'm quite in favor of the variance.
okay, Michael?
Yeah, speaking specifically to the application, it's quite obvious the architect has worked carefully to try and find the best form and character, which, in my opinion, looking at the architecture, seems to be consistent. I would have thought it's consistent with Eagle Cliff. And they've obviously taken care in terms of the angling. I'm certainly going to support it. I can't see they could have gone another way to achieve this. And I think it's probably an enhancement, a worthwhile enhancement to the property, which will see it in enduring here in Bowen for many years to come.
All right, thank you, Michael. Rob?
Yeah, this is a bit of a different variance. It's not getting somebody out of a gym in a way, or it's an addition to a house, but it's definitely a choice that built out from where this person is allowed to build. So I agree with quite a bit of what Councillor Fass had to say, especially with the addition of tree removal. And it is quite a bit, like 3 meters, that's 9 feet, right? So it's not just a little overhang. This is like an extension of a covered deck. So I won't be supporting this variance.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Any other comments? Does somebody want to read the recommendation? Yeah, I will. The council issued development variance permit DVP 06-2020 for the variance of allowed projections for unenclosed porch and roof overhang for 211 Eagle Rock Lane, legally described as Lot ABCP 446059, Group 1, District Lot 1552, PID 028-334-949. I'll move that.
I assume you meant 221 Eagle Rock.
What did I say? 211?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Dyslexia is settling in. Okay, thank you for that. And a second, please.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Allison. And I'll ask a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and opposed?
I'm opposed.
Councillor Fast and Winan.
Okay, thank you. And the recommendation does pass. We're going to move on to bylaws. Bylaw amendments for short-term rental policy number 1905, bylaw number 501, 502, and 503, 2020. And back to you, Emma. Thank you.
Okay. Another presentation. Let's see here. Staff is bringing the short-term rental bylaw amendments back to council for consideration of third reading and adoption. These amendments were given second reading at the May 25th council reading, where council also referred the bylaw to a public hearing. The public hearing took place on June 22nd, and 26 submissions were received. About 20% of these submissions were affiliated with the short-term rental industry. For context, on Bowen Island, about 7% of the private dwellings are estimated to have been used for short-term rental. So just for context, the public hearing submissions may be overrepresented by the short-term rental industry. That being said, generally the submissions agreed that some regulation was needed for the short-term rentals. 6 expressed support for the proposed amendments. Of note, 11 of the 26 submissions wanted more restrictive regulation or a complete prohibition of short-term rentals of entire dwellings. 7 wanted a reduction in the 120-day limit for the residential guest accommodation use, and 5 wanted to see that limit increased. 2 main concerns emerged overall from these submissions. Firstly is concern that municipal enforcement would be inadequate to ensure that the regulations were being followed. And secondly, quite a few of the submissions did not want to see entire dwellings being used for short-term rental if the dwellings were not ordinarily occupied by a resident, either full-time or part-time. And before I jump to the staff recommendation, just want to recap the project progress to date. We have completed 3 out of the 4 phases of this project on schedule and within budget. We are currently in the last phase of implementation, which has been delayed by several months because of COVID. According to the revised schedule here, we are still on track to complete the bylaw end of June or early July, which is now, and to run an awareness campaign through the summer, targeted information sessions in the fall, and starting enforcement for the requirement of a license to operate a residential guest accommodation starting in 2021, and a report back to council at the end of 2021. In a summary of our findings to date, this project was launched in March of 2019 with data collection and collecting research on best practices, followed by over 6 months of community engagement where over 1,900 people were engaged and over 400 feedback submissions were received. Through this process, several key themes were identified. That short-term rental use of entire dwellings provided a very important source of temporary accommodations for the island and contributed significantly to community economic development. However, residents did seem to least prefer this type of short-term rental, especially where the landlords were absentee, meaning the dwelling was not ordinarily occupied by a resident, either full-time or part-time. And across all stakeholder groups, there was agreement that some level of regulation should be in place for short-term rentals, especially to protect residential neighborhoods and long-term housing. Based on those key themes and council direction, the short-term rental policy was developed and adopted by council at the in November of 2019 using a residents first approach. At the open house, the policy received good public support, 2.2 out of 3, and it used several guiding principles, all listed here. Put a list, I'm not going to read all of them, but they directly address all of the community concerns that were identified through the engagement process. So following these principles, the policy set out implementation details, which included bylaw amendments for the land use bylaw, business licensing bylaw, and bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. And these details are informed by the community engagement process, but also by the research on best practices from local communities as well as from around the world. So that was a lot of work that went into these policies, and I understand the stakeholder interests were varied quite widely, but the policy that was developed was to strike a balance between the interests of residents and the local economy. And as mentioned in the staff report, short-term rental regulation is still relatively new and varies a lot from community to community. So being able to say that one type of regulation is most effective for any given community would be very difficult without an evaluation period. So with that, staff recommends that council give third reading and adoption to bylaws 501, 502, and 503, and revisit these bylaws at the end of 2021 to evaluate for effectiveness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Emma. And just before we get going here on the questions, I would just like to reiterate that there will be a full review after 1 year. We're not going to get it perfect in the first year. We pull different examples from different communities, and all the communities are going to be a little bit different. I think the good neighbor policy that's in there is in place is good. And, you know, we'll be backed up by licensing on this. So if anybody misbehaves, we can certainly do something about that. The 120 days, even though some people think it's short, and I know some people would like 365, there is an ability for them to apply for a commercial license. And that's probably what they should be doing if they're renting every day of the year anyway. And that's about where I stand on it. And I'm going to vote in favor of it just to get it going. We've got to get this thing going and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to go to Maureen.
Thank you, Gary. And I'll be voting in favor of these recommendations, although I might propose that there be an additional clause which embeds in the recommendation itself that there be a review at the 1 year mark. Just to have that formalized, I think would be helpful. Although I'm voting in favor, I don't like 120 days. I think that I would prefer fewer, but I'm prepared to see that as a compromise position. I don't like the size of the business license fee at $300. I think it's too low. But again, I'm prepared to accept it as a compromise. I would prefer that the designated person would be on island, but I'm prepared to accept as a compromise that that person be available 24/7. I would prefer to be more confident about the enforcement strategies. I think that we are taking some risks here, but I think that any decisions that we make always involve some risk, and I'm prepared to accept the risk in this situation. And I would like the public to have a better sense of the impact of the short-term rental tax, because I think that there has been some misinformation circulated around the magnitude of that tax and its potential contribution to affordable housing. It's a modest contribution at best. And I am pleased to see, because I didn't see it in the report, I'm pleased to see that there is a formal awareness campaign that is planned for the summer, because I think people will need that campaign to understand the context that there will be operating within. So I will be, as I said, voting in favor.
Thank you, Maureen. David Hawking.
Thank you, Gary. I also will be supporting this. And I really feel that Emma has done an excellent job. She's spent a lot of time on this, and the key issues are being addressed. I also share some of the concerns that Maureen has, and perhaps the most important for me is the designated person. I would prefer that person be on island. But whenever this has gone to council, we've got people who are for it and people who are against it. When it goes to the public, we've got the same. I think Emma's done a good job sort of trying to weave her way with a balanced approach that probably gets everybody a little bit annoyed, but I think she's found kind of some ground that works okay. So I'll be supporting this, but also look forward to the review in a year. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And on to Rob.
Yeah, I'll probably be supporting this motion. I have very, very similar concerns to the ones that Councillor Nicholson raised. The 120 days for me still seems like quite a bit. It's quite a push for me to go that high. I think one of my frustrations, David mentioned frustrations on both sides, and one of my frustrations is that some people have been treating this like this is a business, this is a money-making adventure, and I don't see it at all like that. And I agree with Gary, if that's the motive behind it, get a business license. This is to help people defray some costs when their house is sitting empty for short periods of time. So they're very two different sides. I don't look at this as a way to stimulate business on the island. And I am very concerned about the impact on our long-term rental. I think there will be impact on long-term rental. Now, the flip side is it used to be going on underground, but anyway, it will have that impact. And that's, again, something that has been tough to balance. And I would really, after a year review, I'd also really like to get a good feeling of how much this is costing the municipality. I'm quite concerned that we're maybe not collecting enough money and that we're going to be stuck with the enforcement duties. And I want to make sure that we're recouping that and that we're not losing there. So I will be supporting the motion, but I want us to have a good look at this in a year from now and see how it all rolls out.
Thanks, Rob. Some good points in there. Thank you. Sue Ellen?
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for the planner.
Yeah.
Emma, can you tell us what is the status of that MRD tax? Is it in place now?
No, so the last time that came to council, it was effectively withdrawn. The application couldn't be completed because it didn't make the requirement for the 50% accommodation sector support. And Tourism Bowen Island had written a letter to council vouching to work with the accommodation sector to garner that support. But until such time, the application is incomplete and cannot be submitted.
Thank you. Okay, that confirms what I thought, which was that accommodation providers have not yet indicated their willingness to pitch in. And so I'm concerned about that. However, I will be voting in favor for all the reasons that everybody has been talking about, and which I agree we need to regulate this for the long-term health of the island. I also don't see how house rentals, whole house rentals, are going to help with affordable housing, and unless they're really short periods. So I look forward to revisiting this in in a year or at the end of 2021, I think is what you said, Gary. And I also think that 120 days is too long. And so I've got a bunch of concerns. I've read all the info very carefully, and we've had a lot of input, a good process, and so I'm prepared to go ahead and make a start. So I'm in favor.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. And Michael.
You know, it's interesting, everybody. I don't think I have ever listened to a bylaw being discussed with so many reservations from all concerned.
Well, yeah.
And I can't say I'm surprised. We know what it would permit, basically residential guest accommodation in all residential lots, including with suites, etc., throughout the island. And we know what it would impose and what it would yield. Interestingly, and I was even more perplexed, but clarified when I really reviewed the correspondence we got from the public hearing. And the comments, largely critical, fell into three broad categories. Firstly, those representing tourism, promoting business generally, talking about the benefits of business, talking about the general uptick, supporting businesses that support us all the year round, etc., etc. And of course, for those people in the lodging business, a certain wry humor about how we're going to police about how many people to a room, because there's no one ever heard of a pull-out bed. So I don't know about 2 to a room, but I'll leave that to our poor to-be beleaguered authorities who are trying to manage bylaws. The 120-day, let me just say, I hope everybody is aware that most accommodations have a high percentage of what we call repeat business. And that repeat business is business booked directly with the provider and usually just confirmed with email. So even if you had host compliance, it would never ever be discovered. So you're not actually issuing a 120-day variance, 120-day permit. In my opinion, you're offering something closer to 160 nights, just for the record, because at least 20% of it would be totally undetectable, even if you ever thought you would be detected. So from the hospital, from the people providing accommodation on the island, remembering, by the way, we have no hotels here. We have no hotels. There's not going to be much love or support for this bylaw. And then you've got those people who wrote with real concern about long-term accommodation. And rightly or wrongly, they saw the formal legalization of short-term vacation rentals as threatening the very limited supply we have of long-term rental accommodation. And you'll see and note several letters to that effect. And I think they made, as did the people proposing tourism, they made some very good points. I thought the most significant section of letters actually came for those people who talked mostly about community, talked about Bowen, the quiet, peaceful, livable community they value, their concerns being noise disturbance, disruption, conflict, adversarial amongst neighbors, etc., etc., etc. It's all down there. And I understand their concerns, and they too have expressed no great support for this bylaw. If I could look at it from a business point of view, why won't I don't want my name attached to supporting this, because I think we're short of some fundamental information we need. We have no plan for tourism on this island. We've got plans how to evacuate, thank goodness, it's all good, but we have no plan for one of the major segments of our business. It's a rudderless ship. And we are completely devoid of any strategic vision at all. So here we are making pronouncements through this bylaw, but well, we'll leave the vision, I guess, to someone else, which could never happen in another type of business that I've ever been involved in. And also, when I look at the tourism Bowen numbers of over 100, they quote short-term vacation rentals, to those people worried about whether or not it would deplete our minimal stock of long-term rentals, we don't know. we have never looked at those people offering short-term vacation rentals to see, let's supposing it was disallowed, would that property go on the long-term rental market or wouldn't it? I can't answer that question, and I actually don't know. And I don't think anyone else does either. So frankly, for me, this is a very far-reaching decision. I think it has very, very great unintentional consequences, and I am not prepared to support this. I was concerned from the start. I congratulate Emma for having to work her way around and get all this information. I appreciate the summation given to us by Maureen Nicholson. I think she's right. But for me, this is a house built on sand. We just don't have some of the core information we should have to make a good, sound decision. And I would wish we could defer it back for further consideration. And I'm certainly not going to support it for now. And for those wonderful people who wrote in, I'd really like them to know that I don't support this at this stage. And I appreciate them expressing their concerns, and I appreciate they expressed different concerns. So no, I think this is a bust, and I don't think it's ready to go just yet.
Thanks for that, Michael. And my only comment would be the only way we're going to find out these X factors is by putting something in place. To Allison, please.
Well, I'm pretty well agreeing with everything that Michael said. I think we could maybe go ahead with some sort of regulation and some of the stuff, but I prefer to see it go ahead without any 120-day limit period. I had nothing better to do one night. So I started looking through the Airbnb listings for Bowen, and they put pictures up of the hosts. And so I was able to figure out where most of the properties were. And one of the things that I found very interesting is they list whole house or whole dwelling as being available, and on the host compliance info they talk about whole houses. Most of the accommodation was either a cottage on an existing property where the owner resides, or a suite in the house where the owner resides. And there were very, very few that were what I would call the whole house. So, and the ones that were the whole house, there's no way they'd ever rent in the reasonable, affordable rental category for the monthly rent. So I guess I started to wonder if, why not allow more than 120 days for those full dwellings, which they're called because they're a self-contained suite, or the cottage where the owner resides on the property. So they're basically a home occupation. And the other issue is we don't have any hotels. So I'm guessing that we're going to have no places for people to stay come the end of September and before the beginning of June, because that's when you can get the prime dollars. And if you're limited, then that's when it's going to be rented out. So I'm not supporting it as it is.
All right. So I'm going to read the recommendation, which is a bylaw number 501/2020, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 501/2020 be read a third time, and the bylaw number 502/2020, cited as Bowen Island Municipal Business Licensing Bylaw 465/2018, amendment bylaw number 502/2020 be read a third time, and the bylaw number 503/2020, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 196/2008, amendment bylaw number 503/2020 be read a third time. The bylaws number 501, 502, 503/2020 be finally adopted.
I'll second that with
I think
an
that-
amendment.
Thank you,
Do
Maureen.
you want to add in the additional clause regarding reporting back?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
let's do that.
So that, sorry, go
You have
ahead.
that, Hope?
I do. I said that council directs staff to report back with a progress report after 1 year from the policy's implementation.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, as amended.
As amended.
Any further discussion? I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, how many have we got on the aye side?
David, did you have your hand up? Good. So just Councillor Morse and Kale in opposition.
Okay, does that sound right?
Yep.
I guess it is. All right, the recommendation does pass. And we'll move along and see how things look in a year from implementation. Okay, so 6.2 is the traffic and use of streets bylaw number 133/2005, amendment bylaw number 517/2020, speed regulation. And that's once again, Emma Chow. Thank you, Emma. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Okay. So for this one, staff is bringing back a amendment bylaw for the traffic and use of streets bylaw for speed management. This amendment received first reading and the second and third reading were deferred to June 8th to allow staff time to do a verification of existing speed limit signage. However, due to staff shortage, the verification was not able to complete by the June 8th date. So the deferral was moved to tonight's meeting for consideration.
All right.
Based on, just going to
Go ahead.
go over the findings. Based on
Yeah.
the verification, the existing speed limit signs, there were several changes made to the proposed bylaw. So I'm just going to summarize them quickly here. This is the 20 km/h speed limit map. And based on the previous one, a portion of Eagle Cliff Road, as well as the entirety of Lenora Road and a portion of Melmore Road and Tunstall Boulevard were removed from this map. So they are no longer 20 km/h. And one addition was made to this map, and that was Buchanan Road. So it came down from 40 to a 20 km/h limit.
That's good.
I don't know why I wasn't there before. And this is the 30 km/h map, and a bit longer list of changes here. One removal, and that was Dorman Road. It was 30 and now it's been taken out, so it's back to 40. And most of the changes were actually in the Tunstall Bay neighborhood, moving from 40 to 30 km/h. We have the entirety of White Sails Drive, Reef Road, Cromie Road, Tunstall Boulevard, and there is also a portion of Seymour Bay Drive out in Cowan Point. And in Deep Bay, the road Lenore Road and portion of Melmore Road that was taken out of the 20 is now put into the 30. The signage on the ground for those portions was actually 30. And just 3 other road segments that signage was found for 30 km/h, but staff did not make changes to the bylaw, were for Windjammer Road, the entirety of, found in Blue Water over here, and a portion of Bowen Bay Road up to just past the bend at Bowen Bay, and the entirety of Cape Drive and Cape Rogers Curtis. The 30 km/h signage was on the ground, but council had previously directed that these segments be 40 km/h. Staff just wanted to bring to council's attention that if this bylaw were to be adopted, as shown here, the speed limit signage on these road segments will need to be removed. With that, staff recommend that council give second and third reading to bylaw number 517. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Just one question before we get going here. Something that came up in the email today about this "Do not pass bikes" sign. Can you sort of fill everybody in on that? I don't know if everybody's aware of it.
I could. It's an unrelated project. It also came out of the transportation plan as part of improvements on the cycling network on Bowen Island. And the transportation plan has a number of various cycling improvements that are meant to take place over the next 20 years. So it's very incremental improvement. And for 2019, the priority improvement was safety signage for cycling. Essentially, it's a single file, please do not pass a bicycle, and a list of about a half dozen locations around the island were identified as particularly dangerous for passing cyclists. So those areas were identified for the signage.
Okay, I guess my only comment would be we've had complaints about signage, and I'll get back to the topic here. But my only complaint is we have a problem with signage, and anywhere where you're putting those signs, no one would ever pass a bike on those places anyway. And I think you're just dumbing everybody down, putting a lot of extra signs in. But if you feel that they should be in there, that's you might as well go ahead. So back to the topic at hand. Does anybody have any questions? All right.
You've got a whole bunch of hands up.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Nicholson has her hand up first.
Yeah. Okay. So Maureen, please.
Thank you. Two questions, Emma. It's not stated in your report, but can you just sort of recap the purpose of all of these sign changes? And then the second question, there was a bit of informal rumbling around additional signs, but also the cost of additional signs. Can you give an indication of sort of what the net number of increased or decreased signs will be as a result of this initiative, and the costs involved? So first question has to do with, why are we doing this in the first place?
Both really good questions, and I think the answer to the first one, why, is to establish a bylaw to allow for speed limit enforcement. And currently, under the Motor Vehicle Act, municipalities, if they want to impose a speed limit other than 50 kilometers per hour, will need to pass it by bylaw. So even though we do have signage in place on the roads, we don't have that bylaw yet. So this is that bylaw. There is no intention for sign changes right now. So that's why there was the signage verification. This is to capture what we have existing on the ground. We do have some new speed limit signs, and those were purchased with a grant that came through Vancouver Coastal Health as part of the Vision Zero project. And that's a global movement for improving road safety. So we have a number of new speed limit signs that the municipality did not have to pay for. It was all covered under a grant. And currently there are no plans to install those at any specific location right now. But moving forward, if speeding were an issue and we wanted to have enforcement in those locations, we would first need the bylaw in place and then have the corresponding signage in place. So this is just the process to establish possible enforcement of our speed limits.
Okay, thank you,
All
Emma.
right. Okay, Rob.
Yeah, and thanks for that clarification, Emma. It's good to sort of get that all straight why we're doing this. In the neighborhoods where there's changes in speed, especially the ones where the speed is going up or the signage speed is going up, are we going to are residents aware of that, or are we going to get blowback, hey, why is the speed limit changing, because they don't understand what's happening on the road? Emma? You don't?
The only portions that would be different from what the sign is on the road would be those last 3 road segments in the presentation, and it's also in the staff report. So council had directed those to be 40. If you would like to amend that to match the signage, I think that's council's decision. I don't know. I can't speak for the neighborhoods, how they would react.
Just to follow up on that, Emma, when was it that council made that decision? Was that, I'm trying to think back.
For first reading.
Yeah, but when did council make the decision to up the speed limit on those 3 roads that you mentioned?
So this bylaw was brought for introduction to council, and there was a list of changes that council wanted seen before first reading. So that was, those were some of them.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Sue Ellen?
Yeah, thank you. I'm in favor of this bylaw. I think we need to manage speeds on the island, in part because of safety. And as somebody who rides her bike on the island and has ridden horses and pushed strollers and all those other things that you do as a traffic participant who doesn't happen to be driving a car, I think it's a good way to make everything safer and more welcoming, including for our active transportation initiatives to do with climate change and healthy living. So I'm in favor. I have a couple of questions. Emma, the part, no, never mind. I'm not even going to bring them up. I'm just in favor.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. And Allison, last.
Well, I guess I'm still dumbfounded that we went for 20 years on the full understanding that our speed limit was 40K, because that's what MOT told us it was when we incorporated. And that's what the speed limit was before we incorporated. So if anybody got a ticket for going 45, then I hope they refuted it. Anyhow, that's fine. I still, it seems to me confusing to have, and Emma said that so we can have different direction speed limits, to have 2 maps for each set of speed limits, but that's fine. Waste of paper. I'm just glad to see this is coming to an end.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Any further comments? Questions for Emma? Okay, I'll ask the question. Oh, wait a minute, we got to read this. The bylaw number 517/2020, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Traffic and Use of Streets bylaw number 133/2005, amendment bylaw number 517/2020 be read a second time and third time.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Sue Ellen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great.
You got them there, Hope?
Thought that
Anybody in
was-
opposition?
No, it looked unanimous to me, but please speak up if I missed it.
Okay. Anybody in opposition? No. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you,
Now we're
council.
going to go on to, we're going to go, Allison, to you on 3.5 so that,
Okay,
Emma
so
can go home.
it's the Transportation Committee's minutes of June the 11th.
yes.
So there's a reference to something called a bike banner launch event. What's that all about? And I've got a couple of other questions. David, you're muted.
Yeah, and Emma can speak to this and I can speak to it. So one thing that Emma's mentioned is that the Transportation Advisory Committee has been working on the safety for cyclists. And one of the tricky parts of cycling on Bowen is that a lot of people who drive don't seem to realize that you need to leave some space between you and the cyclists. And this gets to the point that Gary was saying earlier. And there's some places where you shouldn't pass cyclists, like on narrow hills when you can't see. And so what this is, I thought this actually was shown to council, but in any event, it's an event that we're looking at doing where we were going to work with the school with the Bike to Work Week, but of course that didn't happen this year, where we have actually a sort of a full-size image of a person on a bike with some sort of a spacing that shows the amount of space that you should leave. And we'll actually have an event where we'll work with the RCMP to make sure everything is fine. We'll put that on the side of the road and just hold basically an information event so that people realize that it's important, that the safety of cyclists is important. You need to leave some space. People who don't ride their bikes don't realize that on Bowen steep hills, it's very difficult for cyclists to go in an absolute straight line. You just wiggle. On those steep hills, you can't stop from wiggling a little bit. And that's why cars just have to give you some room. Otherwise, we could have some serious. So that's what that event is about, Allison.
Okay.
Thank you,
So-
David.
So second question, when I read just further down in the minutes, it talks about the following elements should be canceled. And it lists about priority A something, B1, B3, and B12. Which then took me to look at the transportation work plan, and the work plan. When you say cancel, does that mean removed from the transportation plan or just deferred in the work plan?
It means, am I still on? Yes, it means deferred in the work plan for this year because of COVID. Those, this transportation is right now completely different.
Okay, so that sort of then brought me to, I went and then looked at the work plan and looked at the transportation plan and looked at the work plan. And a lot of the things that were in the PowerPoint presentation that Emma made at the last transportation meeting, I would never even have guessed were covered by either the work plan or the transportation plan. I can't see anything about bicycle safety in the work plan or the transportation plan. I read A5, I looked, and so I guess was totally surprised to hear that we got a grant to fund the signage and all that stuff. And aren't we supposed to be publicizing the grants we're getting? I mean, I had a quick look in last year's annual report. I haven't looked at this year's, but we don't list the grants we get as a way of saying thank you to the people we get the grants from. And so, yeah, I guess I'm just, a whole bunch of stuff's coming out of this transportation plan in the, what I'll call the detail, that doesn't sort of pop up anywhere to give you a hint that it might be being planned. Anyhow, and just a comment.
Okay, I can respond to that. The cycling signage is not covered by a grant. The grant that was mentioned before for Vision Zero funding was for the speed limit signage, which is a different project than the cycling safety improvement project. The cost of the safety signage for the cycling improvements was approved by council, and it was a $5,000 budget. And I believe about $1,000 was spent.
Just ask a follow-up question. When you say it was approved by council, did council approve a budget line item that said cycling signage, or did we approve a budget line item that said transportation plan implementation?
It would be under the transportation work plan, which does have a line item that says cycling safety signage.
Okay, well,
Under A5.
Is that in the 2018 or 2019 plan?
2019.
Okay, well, I'll look again because I didn't see that.
And I can email it to you. I was just looking at it today.
But we didn't see that as part of our budget consultations and discussions. So anyhow, it's process issues, and I won't tie up the meeting, but I just give you a notice. I've got a few concerns.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Do you want to read the recommendation then?
There is no recommendation associated
Any
with that.
recommendation?
Oh, that's right. There's no recommendation there. Okay, we'll just move on. Thank you.
We didn't need to receive them because I pulled them.
No,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't
Just that
think-
you adopt those.
No, we don't approve the minutes, so we just needed to, I don't have to move to receive them, so that's fine.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to move on to staff report 7.1 and the 2019 Statement of Financial Information. Raj Hayre, Chief Financial Officer. Raj, it's all yours.
Thank you, Gary. Just going to share my screen here. Bear with me for just a sec.
Sure.
Okay, I think you should be seeing my here. So we're reviewing, I'm putting forward in council the Statement of Financial Information report for council approval. So the Statement of Financial Information, also referred to as SOFI sometimes, is required by the Financial Information Act, and it requires public corporations to publicly disclose certain financial information. In terms of what's disclosed, we have it, basically the SOFI report contains the audited financial statements, which were approved by council in the end of May. So I'm not going to go over the financial statements because I've gone over those with council at a previous meeting. It also includes a schedule. We're required to provide a schedule of guarantee and indemnity agreements, which we don't have any of at Bowen Island. We're also required to include a schedule of remuneration and expenses, a statement of severance agreements that were arrived at or commenced or payments commenced on in the current year, have any of in 2019. And we're required to include a schedule of amounts paid to suppliers for goods and services, and finally an approval page. So the report was in the agenda package for council to review. So essentially, when we go to this schedule of guarantee and indemnity agreements, it's actually a list of financial guarantees and indemnity agreements that are in force, which required government approval prior to being given under the guarantees and indemnities regulation. We didn't have any in place, so we reported nil in the report. The next report that we're required to provide is a schedule of remuneration and expenses. And it's a schedule listing of remuneration and expenses provided to elected officials and remuneration and expenses to employees with a threshold of 75,000. That meaning that any employees that make more than $75,000 must be reported separately and identified. And then for employees that make under 75,000, they can be actually combined in total. And that report was in the package, and I'm just providing a quick brief overview of that report. So we had a total of 2,976,102 reported on that report in remuneration, and essentially $70,351 in expenses. And then the next report that we're required to provide is the statements of severance agreements. And again, it's a statement which would reflect the number of severance agreements for non-union employees for which payment commenced during the fiscal year being reported on. So we didn't have any to report for the fiscal year 2019. And next report that's required in Sophie is a schedule of payments to suppliers for goods and services. And again, this report has a threshold of $25,000. So any suppliers that were paid more than $25,000 during the year are identified separately. The report itself contained the report in the format that we're required to provide it to the ministry in. And then my council report itself identified what the payment was for council information. So for every vendor that we made a payment of over $25,000, we had identified what the payment was in a line item in the body of the council report. And essentially, the staff recommendation is that council approve the 2019 financial information prepared by staff and presented to council at the July 13th, 2020 council meeting. And I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have on the statement of financial information report itself.
All right, thank you very much, Raj. So who have we got on the list here? Nobody. Anybody have anything for Raj? Any questions? Clarifications? All right.
Yeah.
Councillor Morse has her hand
Oh, there
up,
you are
and
now.
Councillor
Yeah.
Kale.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that we've got a revised schedule for the disbursements for council expenses, Raj?
You do, yes. So the original that was sent out with the council agenda, we had a very small change to the council expenses. There were some expenses that hadn't been allocated to individual councillor members, and we've corrected that in the report on table.
Okay, thank you. And Michael, to you.
Raj, when I looked at something, for example, the statement of severance agreements, and it says there were no severance agreements entered into during the year 2019. We are referring to the calendar year.
Yeah.
We're referring to our calendar year. Our calendar year, the calendar year is equivalent to our fiscal year, Michael. It ends on December 31st, 2019.
Okay. Entered into, does that mean to say agreed or executed?
Essentially, according to Sophie, there were no payments made in
Okay.
2019 under it, or commenced in 2019.
Okay, so in fact, although we may have come to an agreement, we didn't actually execute the payment in the 2019 year.
That would be correct.
Okay, that's all. That's just a clarification I wanted,
Okay.
because
Yeah,
that page will draw some attention.
you're right, it will. Any further discussion on this? Okay, and I'm going to read the recommendation. The council approve the 2019 Statement of Financial Information as included in the staff report dated June 24th, 2020, and presented to council at the July 13th, 2020 regular council meeting. And yeah, that's it.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Joellen. And any further discussion?
Well,
All
my
in
only
favor?
concern is the motion says as included in the staff report, and we did amend one schedule.
So Allison, the report will get amended tomorrow when I revise the agenda with the amended schedule.
So the revised agenda that's going to be posted on the website will have the correct schedule in it.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Allison, for that. And okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go to section consent agenda 3.3 here. So Raj can be finished. And that's to Maureen, please.
Yeah.
And David also had a comment on that.
Okay.
I have two concerns. The first is the name of the bylaw. The Land Opportunity Reserve Fund bylaw doesn't clarify for me what it's about. So I think that something that's a bit more plain language might be advisable, and I'm not quite sure what that is. And then when I looked at the bylaw itself, I was a bit puzzled. I understand how the money gets into the reserve fund. I'm not quite sure how the money gets out of the reserve fund. So the description in the bylaw of the disbursement of funds, from my perspective, do with some clarification.
Okay, essentially, maybe I'll deal with the first part of your question or concern. So I named it the Land Opportunity Reserve Bylaw because most of the normal types of contributions that will come into this reserve will come as a result of sale of lands. I mean, I was thinking of the community lands. And the intended purpose of the bylaw is also to essentially allow council to be able to make strategic initiatives or repay debt with proceeds that are deposited to the fund itself. I mean, just in terms of providing clarification of how funds will go in and out of the bylaw and why we've established this bylaw, maybe I'll just quickly go through a few of the slides that I had prepared in case the bylaw was pulled from consent agenda. So essentially, commencing in 2020, BIM will start receiving proceeds from the sale of municipal lands, as council is aware. And so according to the community charter, money received from the sale of land and improvement must be placed in a reserve fund for the purpose of paying any debt remaining in relation to that property if there's outstanding debt, or acquiring real assets. So that language comes from the community charter, generally speaking. And essentially the terms of funds going into the reserve fund, the net proceeds from the sale of real property will go into the reserve fund, and then all income earned on, so interest income essentially, earned on the reserve balance would also be credited to the reserve. In terms of use of money from that reserve fund, which was what you were asking about, Maureen, any use would require council resolution to begin with. And the purposes are stated in the use of funds as well, that it would be used to acquire real property for municipal purposes or repay municipal debt arising from the acquisition of real property. So by this, it was the acquisition of the community lands resulted in $2 million of $2 million of temporary borrowing, which was converted to long-term borrowing. So so that was long-term debt taken out on the acquisition of real property. So we would use the proceeds in this reserve fund to repay that.
Okay.
And so, did I address your questions there?
Yeah, but I still have concerns. Given what you described, it would seem to me that it would make more sense to call this bylaw something like sale of municipal lands and community lands debt repayment bylaw. Somebody reading that would actually understand what the purpose of the bylaw was. And I'm also not quite sure, there was a subsequent to the agenda message that came out this afternoon with part of the bylaw struck on the recommendation of Councillor Morse. So I'm not quite sure which version of the bylaw we're considering at this point. The message from Hope indicated that the clause 2.2.1 was going to lose the latter part of the clause, so that it would read net proceeds from the sale of real property owned by the municipality, and what was being struck was except as otherwise directed by council resolution. So
actually, that Councillor Morris had a very good point in that where we had said except as otherwise directed by council resolution, council cannot pass a resolution that would contradict a superior legislation or the community charter. So the community charter does require that the net proceeds from sale of property be deposited to a reserve fund. So council could not redirect funds to not go into that reserve per se. Like they couldn't say they couldn't commission it to some other use. It would have to go to the reserve, and then funds from that reserve could be used for another purpose. Like you can do internal borrowing between reserves, for example, right? Which is a totally different part of the community charter, but you couldn't specify that these funds from the sale of community lands be used for some other purpose. They need to go into a reserve as per the community charter.
okay, I understand the hierarchy there. Then I've got a better sense of how the money gets in there, but I'm still not clear on how the money gets out and for what purpose. If we have funds coming into this reserve from the sale of Area 1 Lot 2, and we have funds coming into this reserve from the sale to the Health Center Foundation, are we establishing this bylaw so that any funds in this reserve will be used solely to defray the 2 million odd that we encouraged to purchase the community lands, or are there other purposes?
So council currently has no funding source to make strategic decisions on an ongoing basis when it comes to land or property. So if council wanted to enter, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. If we talked about some lands where it would be strategically advantageous for the municipality to acquire lands, this fund, when it has funding in it, could be a source to allow council to make strategic decisions such as that, to purchase real property in the event the opportunity comes up and the reserve has funds in it. Without the existence of a reserve like this with funding in it, you wouldn't have the opportunity to act on that. That being said, the community charter does also require us to put funds where there is debt outstanding on lands into a reserve fund and repay it when you have an opportunity. So if the community lands debt does not come up for payment, we can't make a lump sum payment on those lands until 2029. So that would be our first opportunity to be able to repay make a lump sum payment on that debt. And so council would have the opportunity at that time to use the proceeds in this reserve to repay the debt.
And in the interim, the only purpose that these funds could be used for would be for land acquisition of some sort? Liam is nodding.
Yeah, based on what the balance in that reserve fund is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm a bit clearer on what you're doing here. I still think that it needs a better name. It's
Can I
not,
just say, I'd like to hear from our CAO as well as
Yeah.
people have their hands up.
Liam, go ahead for just clarification.
I was just going to speak to the question of the name, and it's the idea. I like the name because it's got a lasting name that perhaps go beyond the scope of the sale of community lands that we currently refer to. So it's not limited to the sale of the community lands and or the revenue that comes in from those. So it is entirely possible to have future land sales that go outside the scope of the existing community lands. So I just would caution about naming it something that was just specific to the community land.
well, then what I'd suggest is just calling it something like land sales reserve fund. Opportunity is just such an overused, non-meaningful word these days.
But I think putting the word sales would give the impression that it's related to sales. So the intention of the reserve is to allow council to act on opportunities to purchase land as well. And that's why I had chosen that particular wording. But I'm open to a name change that better suits the community. And I mean, if council has another, I can't think of another word that was better describe what the intention of the reserve is myself. So if council has some suggestions, I'd be more than willing to entertain those and bring this back to council if that is council's desire.
Yeah, I kind of like that myself, the land opportunity, because we're saving money in reserves to help us out in the future. It's almost like a legacy reserve fund. Who else we got? Allison, go ahead.
I think David was one of the ones that pulled it, so she would let him speak first, and then I've got a few comments.
All right, thank you, Allison. Okay, go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I'm happy with the name. I like the opportunity idea. But my question is around the use of money and 3.2.1 in the report. And what I understand the law says, it's can be used obviously to repay municipal debt, but also acquiring other assets of a capital nature are the words in the report. And now we have acquire real property. And I don't know what real property actually means. And
Real estate, yeah.
So real property, David, refers to land and anything that may be attached to the land and is not movable. So it would mean land and buildings essentially. Or a piece of machinery that is affixed and would go with the land and is typically not movable, because if it was movable, it would fall under the definition of personal property. So the community charter does allow the reserve fund to be used for other capital property as well. And in the terminology of the reserve itself, I have limited it to real property because that was the intention of setting up the reserve, is to act on land opportunities. And so not for example, so to act on something like our digester project, for example, because then you would have a very wide potential use of the reserve. So I was trying to keep it specific to strategic decisions pertaining to land, and it would also kind of hopefully, I mean, most municipalities don't want to deplete their inventory of land, or if they do sell some land, they want to have some funding available to acquire other land or act on strategic strategic opportunities since land is an appreciating asset in comparison to other types of assets.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Raj. I now I understand it better, and I agree with your rationale that you've just described as land as an appreciating asset. So thank you. I support this now.
Okay, Allison?
Well, I was going to say more or less what Raj just said. The actual wording in the legislation in 188(2)E is from the sale of land and improvements, not, they don't use the word real property, they use the word land and improvements, which might be a little more understandable to the layperson. And under disbursements, it can be used for either repaying the debt remaining in relation to the property or for acquiring land improvements and other assets of a capital nature. So I think Raj has made a good pitch there to leave out other assets of a capital nature. But I kind of would like, to me, acquiring land and improvements is a little clearer than real property using, say, the community center, for example. We already loan the land, but we could use the money if we've repaid the debt, which we don't have enough to do at this point. But had we had enough in land sales to repay the debt, then we could have used some of the extra to build the community center. So
Yeah.
I guess the question is, do we replace the word real property with land and improvements?
Well, I like that idea.
I'm happy to do so. We can replace that with land improvements. Because for the most part, that is what real property means.
Yeah, I mean, it's to you and I, but I'm not sure to the layperson.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to do that.
Hope, what would that look like as a recommendation there?
Well, we just have to move some amendments to the bylaw first. And I had the same questions Maureen did about opportunity fund, but.
Can't hear you, Hope.
Sorry, as amended, and then we could just insert the amendments you would like. So you want to change real property to land and improvements?
And that's in 2 places.
Yep.
And delete the clause except as otherwise directed by council resolution. I'll give up on the whereases.
So
Okay,
it's
was there
it's
another
actually in
change?
3 places. It's in 2.21 and it's in 3.22.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay. So just those 2 changes then. Is that correct?
I think so.
There's 3. There's 1 in 3.21 and
Yeah, I can capture those later, but just the two main changes are real property to land and improvements and the deletion of that last sentence, except as otherwise directed by council resolution, correct?
Right.
Right, okay. Yep.
Except, okay, I'm being picky. It says for the purposes of paying any debt remaining in relation to the property. So I think you should maybe just leave that as property.
Sorry, which section is that, Councillor Morse?
Well, I'm reading it from 188, section 188 of the community charter says must be replaced with the credit of a reserve fund for the purposes of paying any debt remaining in relation to the property and of acquiring land improvements and other assets.
So how would you like 3.2?
Well, I think we
to
could
read?
just leave 3.2.2 to say acquisition of, just leave that one as property.
It is currently property. So
So it's
you mean delete real?
property right now, yeah.
Okay.
And just replace real with the.
Now I've got a question. By
Go
replacing,
ahead, sir.
by replacing it with, so that it now reads the property, does this mean you've got a separate fund for each piece of property that we might sell?
No.
No.
Okay,
Just lose
just
the article.
confirming. Yeah, thank you.
I'd recommend just losing the article the acquisition of property.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be clearer. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, is everybody okay with those amendments?
Yes,
All right, so can somebody move that as amended?
I'll move it as amended.
I'll
Okay, thank
second
you,
it.
David. Okay, thank you, Allison, and last question, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
In opposition?
Did we have to move and specify that we were moving at first three readings? Oh, we'll fix
Well, that was in the bylaw.
The
yeah.
recommendation, yeah.
Yeah, the recommendation was in the
Yeah,
bylaw and
we
it
got
just
it.
came in as amended.
Perfect, thank
All
you.
right. Okay, and
Thank you.
perfect. And we'll move on to, sorry, just catching up here. And it's the staff reports, collaborative project services agreements, neighborhood kiosk. Daniel Martin.
I thought we did that.
I think you're, we should be at 7.2.
7.2.
Oh, that's
Application to
back in
the
that.
ALC.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so application of the Agricultural Land Commission, Grafton Lake Phase 1 subdivision, Mount Gardner Holdings, John Reed and Judy McLeod. Is Judy here?
Yep, I'm just.
Hello.
Awesome. It's all yours, Judy.
Good evening. So we have before you, I think this is probably the first one of these that certainly we've had in my experience here. And it's an application to the Agricultural Land Commission. And Hope, if I could get you to go to the next slide for me, please. As you know, Council a couple of years ago approved the rezoning and official plan amendment applications for development around Grafton Lake. And we have received a subdivision from John Reed on behalf of Mount Gardner Holdings and Island Garden Estates for the first phase of the subdivision. And it is about 80 hectares in total. And of that, about 60 hectares will become, the green area that you see on the slide will be deeded to the municipality as nature reserve and essentially as watershed to the Grafton Lake area. The subdivision will provide for some residential development, and also the lot for the water treatment plant will be deeded to the municipality as part of this application. There's a little bit of the application down in the very southeastern corner, which if you look down at the green bit and then the part that says 8, and Hope, if I can get you to go to the next slide, please. This is a blow up of it. That little bit, so of the 80 hectares, about 6.5 hectares fall within the Agricultural Land Reserve. The Agricultural Land Commission Act states that an approving officer is not allowed to approve a subdivision until it, unless the subdivision is permitted under the ALC Act and its regulations. So essentially, it needs to be submitted to the ALC for their review and approval, and they will not review it unless it is authorized by the local municipal council. So the purpose of the report tonight is to have you review this application and to you have the opportunity to not authorize it, and in that case the ALC will not consider it at all, or you have the opportunity to authorize it and make any other additional comments that you like. This is a really interesting little bit of a subdivision application, and as you can see, the subdivision is actually created by the dedication of Grafton Road. So I think something that a lot of people who drive on it every day don't realize is that Grafton Road really has never been dedicated to the municipality as a municipal road allowance. It's existed for over 100 years as a trail, and it's been improved and maintained by the municipality, but never actually dedicated. So its dedication through the subdivision will create 2 separate lots. The northern part, which is the hatched green area, would be deeded to the municipality as part of the nature reserve area. And you can see the ALC boundary is that sort of purple line around it. The portion to the south, which is lot 8, is the area that it's mostly treed, and it's also the area of the community garden that has been created along Grafton Road. So it is in agricultural use. So these are the 2 lots that would be created. About 0.57 hectares of land will be actually used for the road allowance, and another 0.15 or 125 will be part of this little road called Road N, that little northern part that is access up into the subdivision. That doesn't actually cause any subdivision of the land, but it's a road that is needed for access purposes, and that will be about 15 meters wide. The Grafton Road allowance will be between 22 and 24. So the purpose of the report is to have you review the application. That's just an air photo that gives you a sense of what the land looks like. And I think most people are certainly familiar with the area. It contains the Grafton, the northern portion that will be deeded contains the Grafton Lake Dam. And the area is sort of swampy and parts and inundated from time to time. And then there's a rocky upland. So it's really not suitable for agriculture. The portion south of Grafton Road is used partially in agriculture. So it's recommended that council support this application. And the reasons for that is that the land, it's not proposed to remove the land from the ALR. The land will stay in the ALR. Both parcels will remain in in a zone that permits agricultural as a permitted use. And it's really, I think, quite important that we get Grafton Road dedicated as a municipal road, and the road N into the subdivision is also important, as it's an access to the residential area in the subdivision, and it also will be access to the water treatment plant. So my recommendation to you is that council advise the Agricultural Land Commission that it authorizes and strongly supports the application by Mount Gardner Holdings and Island Garden Estates ALC application ID 60466 for a subdivision which is partially within the agricultural land reserve.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Just a question on lot 8. Didn't they try to swap that out already? The with the ALR to on the other side of the road, sort of just west of lot 7 there.
I'm not sure if lot 8 was part of that. I know that there was an application earlier to do a bit of an exchange for some land in and some land out of the ALC, which was refused.
Yes, that's the one that I was thinking of. Anyway, that's I'm certainly in favor of it. I don't know how well it'll go. What happens if it doesn't go?
We've got a plan B, but it would be a matter of keeping, I think, as a hooked parcel and covenanting. But the problem is that if we want to dedicate some of the land to the municipality, I think that if it remained a hooked parcel, John would have to continue to maintain ownership of the part that he was going to deed to the municipality, but we would just covenant for a nature reserve. But hopefully it's a straightforward enough application that the ALC will approve it.
Well, I hope so. I'm certainly in favor of it. Okay, so who have we got on the list here? Allison first.
Judy, I can't find my file, but there was a covenant signed, and there's money that's supposed to come to the municipality in each of the subdivision phases, so much per lot that's created. And it looks like there are more than just, there's all these lots on above the road are being created, or just this piece that for the nature reserve. I wasn't clear.
The subdivision undertakes a number of lot line adjustments of lots sort of in the surrounding area. It also creates a parcel for 10 affordable housing units. It creates another parcel which will further be subdivided into a strata for about 11 lots, and it creates the lot for the water treatment plant.
Yeah.
So all the lots that are sort of labeled 1 to 7 that are north of Grafton Road are getting created.
Some of them are being created, some of them are lot line adjustments.
Okay, so I guess my question is, we're being careful that we're not doing something that's going to not let us get the money. Are we triggering a money payment? Because is this phase 1?
Well, I mean, the subdivision has been received and the subdivision application is being reviewed. I am not able to deal with the subdivision application until such time as the ALC approves it.
Yeah.
So this is just one of the steps along the process of the subdivision review.
Okay, so this isn't the final step, and once you
No.
get that, you're approving it. So we can still follow up on my
Yeah.
question. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Allison. David?
You're
Sorry.
muted. Oh.
Yeah, I know. Thanks. Thank you, Judy. Yeah, and I support this. And but just to be clear, for those members of the public who might think it looks like we're taking land out of the agricultural land reserve, the only land that we would not be able to be using for agriculture, although some of the land would be inappropriate, but beside the point, is actually where the road goes. That's correct.
That's correct, and those roads really are already in place. So the land would remain in the agricultural land reserve. We're not recommending that it be removed.
That's right. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, David. Maureen?
I'll be supporting this recommendation. I think it tidies up a long-standing issue with Grafton Road.
Oh, yeah,
And I think
definitely.
the requirement to have the lot for the water treatment plant is
Yeah. All right, thank you. Sue Ellen?
Yeah, thank you. I'm in favor of this recommendation. I'm also in favor of doing it now because the Agricultural Land Reserve Land Commission is changing the rules. And so I think September 30th, the remaining portions of the new ALR general regulation will be brought into force. Anyway, we're in a transitional phase even now, and I think the sooner we do it, the better. And yeah, that's a long-standing road. We're not changing any land. We're not taking land out of the ALR that isn't already road and used as road and has been for since it was a wagon trail or a trail in the early days. So I'm in favor.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Any other comments? Okay, I'll read the recommendation. The council advised the Agricultural Land Commission that it authorizes and strongly supports the application by Mount Gardner Holdings and Island Garden Estates, ALC application ID 60466 for a subdivision which is partially within the Agricultural Land Reserve. I move that. Second.
Second.
Okay, I got Michael there. And I'll ask the question, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Judy. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye for now.
Bye.
And 7.3, Development Variance Permit DVP 04-2020 for 651 Laura Road. And that's Cutter Service Corp, Dr. David Evans. Jennifer Ray Pierce, Planner 1. It's all yours.
Hello and good evening,
Hi.
Mayor and Council. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just quick slides. This is the consideration for DVP 04-2020 at 651 Laura Road, which is located in the Adams Road neighborhood in kind of the center lower west of the island there along the Mount Gardner Park area. So you can see the site there at 651 Laura Road at the triangular lot. So in this case, what we have happening here is there is a new dwelling that is being built to be the primary dwelling that has already been approved for building based on a development permit that was issued last year. And in that permit, the applicant indicated that they would be demolishing the existing dwelling there that is currently being used as a rental unit. So the development variance now is in order to actually keep the dwelling in order to maintain that dwelling as a long-term rental as it is in use now. And the applicant has expressed interest in maintaining the current renters as well as the current use of that existing building. So the variance is because that building is larger in size than a secondary suite is typically allowed. So we typically allow up to 115 square meters as a maximum size for a secondary suite. And this one is 214 square meters. So staff is suggesting that we include a housing agreement with this variance. And that would be part of the permit would stipulate that a housing agreement would be negotiated and agreed upon. And so the draft DVP includes stipulations that would be included in the housing agreement. And one of them has been adjusted since you last saw the draft DVP. So I've highlighted this here in green. So the housing agreement would be to maintain the building as it is, to offer it as long-term rental. And then the new elements is just a bit more specificity about the affordable rental rate. So what we're suggesting is that the rental rate is connected to the life of the building itself, and that the maximum rate is fixed at the current rate of rental for the building, which is currently at $2,300 or a lower amount, unless the affordable housing rate according to the housing income limits as identified by BC Housing exceeds that amount. So if that amount goes up above $2,300, then they would be able to raise that rental rate accordingly. But otherwise it would be fixed at the current rate. We also have had a bit more public comments since then. So we now have a total of 5 letters from the public, with 3 coming in since the last time you saw the application, and an additional letter from the applicant. All of the commenters have expressed overall support for the project, citing the need for affordable housing on the island, and also the fact that the location of the building is rather secluded. It's to be noted, though, that one commenter did have concerns about the size increase, but overall supported the case based on the specifics of the application itself. So the recommendation now is that council issue this development variance permit, which would vary the maximum allowable size of the detached secondary suite from 115 square meters to 214 square meters.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. Okay. Anybody have some questions here? Let me pull it up. I have no questions in the queue. Does anybody have any questions?
I got one, Gary.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob. I got you there. Or Sue Ellen was first. Sue Ellen was first. Yeah. And then Rob.
Sure. Just in case people were wondering, this is one that I don't have a problem with because it's such a clear community need for affordable rental housing, and because that's captured in the housing agreement. So I'm in support.
Thank you. And Rob, over to you.
Yeah, Jennifer, I'm just trying to get sort of a picture of how much massing of housing is happening on that property. So 115 square meters, how many feet are we talking about? So it goes from 115 to 214. How many square feet, how big is that house right now, basically? How many square feet?
That would be just over 2,000. I believe it's around 2,300, more or less. I can give you a more exact number if you need it.
That just ballpark is good. Okay. And then, so a new residential house is being built above it. How big is that one roughly going to be?
So the new proposed primary dwelling is overall 10,000 square feet.
Wow.
Wow. What's the maximum size of a house that we can put on a property like that?
There is no maximum housing
dwelling.
size. It's based on the size of the lot. So, but we don't have like a set maximum. I would need to look that up because it wasn't part of there hasn't been any variance or anything. So they're within the allowable size. If you give me a couple of minutes, I can look it up.
Well, as long as it's As long as they're legal, that's fine.
Yeah, but it is within the size that's allowed, both in terms of the allowable built-up area on the site and the square footage overall.
Okay. I'm just curious, how is that regulated? Because 10,000 square feet, that's like almost 5 houses, you know, so could it get even bigger than that? Or how is that? Yeah.
It's determined based on the zone, right? So in this case, for 1 moment, sorry, just pulling up my file here. So this one is zoned. Okay, my apologies. I'm gonna have to pull up the old application. Okay. Zoned RR2. Okay.
If I can, Jennifer, I'll just jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob, in our rural zones, we allow a maximum lot coverage, which can go up to 1,500 square meters. I believe that maxes out on a 10-acre lot. It's like 15, so that's, what is that, 45,000 square feet of lot coverage? No, 15,000 square feet of lot coverage, and that's just the footprint of the building. So you could theoretically on a 10-acre lot build a 3-story building within the height limit.
So in the case of this particular lot, the lot coverage maximum is 9,700 square feet. So even though that number is lower than the 10,000, that's lot coverage and not square footage of the home. So the size of the home is limited by a combination of the lot coverage and the maximum height.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So Jennifer, if we wanted as a council to look at the sizes of houses, how would we do that? How would we go about looking at something like that?
Well, so we would need to review what are our options there, but I can tell you that in other municipalities, there's different approaches. One of them is to set a maximum dwelling size, which some neighboring places have done, but that's not the only way to do it. There's also, SFRs where it's based on the ratio of the lot to the building size, although we sort of effectively do that by having the height limitation and the building lot coverage.
Okay, thanks for that, Jennifer.
And it's almost a 10-acre lot, right?
The lot is 2.3 hectares.
Yeah, so pretty close to 10 acres.
Yeah, it's getting there.
In acres, it's 5.6.
No, that's not right.
Yeah.
Is it?
2.29 hectares becomes 5.67 acres.
Anyhow,
2.2 acres.
It's a big lot and they're well within.
I don't know if they're well within, but they're within.
Well, they're within. You're not going to see the other house from the road or from the rental place, I don't think. So
Yeah, I'm not sure how that affects this discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
If they were to maximize the built square footage by building up 9 meters and doing 3 stories throughout, they would end up with 29,000 square feet in total of all structures.
We approved one of these on Sunset. It wasn't quite as extreme as this, but yeah, I guess I don't really have a problem with it. It is a very rural piece of property. Anybody else have comments on it? I don't see any hands up here.
I'll move the motion.
Well, there's
as
one, Sue Ellen.
recommended.
Sue Ellen,
Yep.
go ahead.
Just to say, I would welcome a discussion about house maximum house size. Partly because, like this, we've allowed some properties to have several buildings, and one of them is supposed to be smaller. That's the topic here, and I'm in favor of this recommendation. But in general, are we becoming an island of sort of big estate homes, and or are we following many of the other principles that are in our official community plan, the community values, small community caring, all of that kind of thing. Anyway,
I don't
at
think
some
that's
point-
a discussion. I don't think that's a discussion for right now.
No, all I'm saying is I look forward to discussing it at some point because
Yeah.
Rob took the time to bring it up.
Absolutely, thank you. So does somebody want to read the recommendation?
I said I would move the recommendation as
Okay, thank you.
recommended.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That's
Okay,
everyone.
opposition? No one?
Or-
Okay,
Councillor Wynan was in opposition, I believe.
sorry?
No. I vote aye.
Just a
Okay,
delayed
thanks, Rob.
hand. Okay, all good.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye for now. 7.4, Community Center Project Update. Mayor Ander, Chair, Community Center Select Steering Committee, Shauna Jennings, Manager of Rec and Community Services. So we had a meeting last week about the community center. Obviously, we've secured the funds from the federal and provincial government to the tune of $8 million, and everybody's very excited about it. So we're trying to find a direction forward here, and this is the outcome of the discussion we had at that time. Shauna, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Just that,
Or go to questions?
just that this is really great news for the municipality and for Bowen Island, and that staff has been picking up the project, moving forward with project management, communications, preparing tender documents, and moving towards some fundraising, and that we would anticipate bringing more frequent updates to council. Staff has received the agreement from the province, and we don't have any concerns about the contract. It's been reviewed. The eligible expenses we're able to date back to April 20th, 2020 for reimbursement, and the contract states that construction or completion of the project should be by March 2025. So at this time, staff is recommending that council direct staff to sign the contract agreement documents, which I believe everybody had in their agenda package, and that will allow us to receive the grant funding for the project.
All right, do you want to do these? We'll do them all separately. Does anybody have questions on that first part then? The first recommendation? Basically that we're going to sign the deal to get the money. Does anybody have an issue with that? Probably not. Okay, all in favor, or I'll move it. The
I
recommendation.
think you should read this one for the record, Gary, because it's so
Okay.
important.
Whereas Bowen Island Municipality applied for a $7.9 million Investing in Canada program grant for the community center project, and whereas Bowen Island Municipality was successful in securing the grant for a total of $7.960925, and whereas the contract agreement between Bowen Island Municipality and Her Majesty the Queen in right of the province of British Columbia, represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, is due to be signed by July 14th, 2020. Therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to sign the contract agreement document to receive the grant funding for the community center project. I'll move that. Yeah, thank you, Allison. Any further discussion? I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye.
Hang on, Maureen is asking.
Oh, sorry. I'm coming here. I didn't see your hand up.
Just 2 points. In
Yeah.
the announcement of this award, This was the largest award listed
Wow.
in
Yeah.
the
For the Lower Mainland, yeah.
Lower Mainland, which is pretty significant. And the other thing is that Minister Selena Robinson sends her best wishes via Twitter, saying,
All right.
Bowen Island.
Oh, isn't that great? Well, thank you, Selena. All right. So did we clear that one? Did I ask the question?
Not yet.
All in favor? Aye.
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 It's a hard one to turn down, isn't it? Yeah, I
Unanimous.
think that's probably going to be unanimous. So the rest of this, the Part B community center referendum question, obviously there was a discussion about when to hold the referendum, the best time to do it, and when we could actually get it in there was the next subject of discussion. So the recommendation there is that council direct staff to hold a referendum on September 12th, 2020 to obtain elector assent to borrow $4.040000 to construct a community center for Bowen Island. And there's another recommendation that also goes along with that. And that is that council rescind the previously approved referendum question. Are you in favor of the council of Bowen Island Municipality enacting Bowen Island Municipality loan authorization for the community center project bylaw number 477, 2019, which authorizes the Bowen Island Municipality to borrow a sum not to exceed $4,040,000 to construct the proposed community center, and the council approve the following referendum, the following referendum question.
It should just be that council
Yeah,
approves the
let's
following
go.
referendum question.
Yes, thank you. Bowen Island Municipality has received a one-time grant of $7.9 million towards funding the community center project through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Are you in favor of enacting Bowen Island Municipality Loan Authorization Bylaw number 477, 2019, which authorizes the Bowen Island Municipality to borrow a sum up to $4,040,000 to construct a community center for Bowen Island? All right, anybody want to query that?
Yeah.
Okay, Maureen.
It's a suggested revision to the referendum question itself.
Yes.
Are you in favor of enacting Bowen Island Municipality loan, etc., which authorizes the Bowen Island Municipality to borrow a sum of up to $4,040,000? And here's the suggested addition.
Okay.
To complete the funding required to construct a community center for Bowen Island. Because otherwise, there's somebody reading this quickly is going to potentially think it's $4 million to construct, and we've got $8 million in a grant, and what's going on. So to clarify,
Okay. That's a good point, and we did have a discussion about that. I'd like to bring back Shauna. What do you think about that? Because I'm certainly okay with it.
I'm okay with that as well. I think it's important to list that the grant has been received, that the $7.96 million is there as part of the question, so that people who are coming out to vote know that that is part of the money. So I agree, Maureen, that's a good addition to say that it is to complete the funding, knowing that we also had 1.2 in reserves and 1.3 at fundraising. And just important to note that that would be possibly the maximum borrowed, and that there could still be funds raised that would help with the funding of the whole project.
That's correct. Yeah, it is, and it's certainly an up to, if the fundraising is successful, we'll obviously take that out of the amount. So just for clarification, Hope, have you got that last line?
I do.
Okay. Could you just read it, please?
So I'll just leave the last paragraph. Are you in favor of enacting Bowen Island Municipality Loan Authorization Bylaw number 477, which authorizes the Bowen Island Municipality to borrow a sum of up to $4,040,000 to complete the funding required to construct a community center for Bowen Island?
Yeah, I like that. Okay, I'll move that.
Do you want to go back and deal with the first recommendation first, which is the the date of the referendum.
Yeah, that's probably good. Sorry.
Let's do them in
So
order.
back, yeah, let's stay in order here. So the first recommendation, I'll move that, which is to do with the date of September 12th, 2020. You have a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Any discussion on this at all? Okay, good. I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we'll move on to the second recommendation, which is quite long. And as amended by Maureen, which is very good. I will move that.
Second.
Thank you, David. And any further discussion? I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we get them all, Hope?
Yes, thank you.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you, everybody. We're gonna move forward then. Going to go to correspondence. Sat Pandar, read the anti-racism, inclusion, diversity dated June 23rd, 2020. So everybody's seen the letter that Sat wrote in. And I think it was the feeling in the administration that we really don't have anything on the books and to deal with this, and it should be dealt with, but we don't have anything to address these issues in the municipality. So it was felt that we should have a policy, and so this is what we're talking about, directing staff to look into this equity, inclusion, and anti-racism policy for the Bowen Island municipality. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do, Gary.
David, go ahead.
Got some additional information. It's obviously this is an important step for us to take, but maybe we should wait a little bit. Metro Vancouver is working on some workshops on this issue, on discussion forums on institutional racism that they'll on a sub-regional basis. So there'll be clusters of municipalities working together on this. This is just being developed right now, so I don't have any real information more than that. It'll be fairly soon, and that would probably be fairly useful. And I'm looking at the recommendation where we're asking staff to look at and describe next step actions arising from this and so on. So I think these workshops would probably be quite useful to help us figure out what the next steps actually should be. So that's why I'm just providing this additional information. Maybe it's worth waiting a little while before we set to work on this.
I'm just going to jump in there. Councillor Morse had sent some revisions to the recommendation.
Okay.
And just to sort of, Councillor Morse, do you want to speak to it? I can read it, but if you want to just give the...
Yeah, thanks, Hope. I guess Sad in his email had suggested that we have a policy on diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism. And the motion text about equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. And I sort of did a little looking, and I also thought, because we can't control what the public does, it's a policy for us that we should change the order so that it would say that council directs staff to prepare a Bowen Island municipality policy to address diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism, and to recommend specific next step actions to respond to the renewed sense of urgency to address systemic racism. So not actually come for, to make some recommendations, but
basically saying the same thing, but
well, it changes the order a little bit, and it's softening the and I think maybe picks up a bit on David's point, because it recommending some next steps, and there's no timeline for that one, so it could certainly fall in after the workshops. I don't know. I mean, we don't have a lot of policies, so I think we probably do need to expand our policies, and we haven't put a timeline on it. So I think we should be asking Liam for some advice.
Well, I'll William?
No, Liam.
Yeah. No, Liam's, he's got good advice. I was going to go to him.
There's other people on
yeah, let's my only thought is we should get going on this. Unfortunately, there is some urgency on this because A lot of municipalities and cities and that thing do have the policy. So the people that don't have the policies are sort of being the outliers right now. I'm going to go to Liam first and then back to you, Sue Ellen and Maureen. Liam, could you comment on this?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it's a great time to look at developing such a policy. You know, I think that a lot of these guiding principles are likely in practice, but it's great to have it more formalized and something that we can point to. So I support it wholeheartedly. From an administrative point of view, you know, all the organizations I've worked with have had similar policies, and as well as training programs to ensure that staff have opportunities to take training to become more aware of the importance of these issues. And so I think it's the timing of what Metro Vancouver is doing is actually a good point that Councillor Hawking makes, and that we can take advantage of that. But I don't think we necessarily need to wait for Metro to come out with theirs. And I believe Metro is looking at a suite of different training opportunities for all their board members. And so there may be some really good opportunities that we can borrow from that for Bowen Island, as well as Metro has already implemented some more staff level, administrative level policies directly related to this. And so I think, you know, I would very much look forward to taking this on and to working with the staff and council on developing this. And I do think it's good to not put a fixed date on it as yet, but that we do keep it as a high priority.
I kind of like the idea of moving it forward at this time and just bringing in the bits and pieces as they come. You know, would be my thinking on it. So I got Sue Ellen there. Thanks, Liam.
Yeah, I'm speaking in favor of passing something tonight. I'm happy with Allison's changes there or this. And I agree, now is the time. And there's also going to be, I expect, other possibilities of model policies and things like that coming from the Lower Mainland Leadership or Local Government Academy and the LGLA and UBCM, and there'll probably be a number of opportunities for learning. And so I agree, let's take what comes, but also get working on it ourselves. So I'm happy to make the motion, but go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, Maureen, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll support the motion, but I have to say that I think the recommendation is pretty vague, and I would find it difficult as a staff person to know where I might start. So I'm glad to hear from David that there is some work being done in Metro, and I'm glad that Liam is prepared to take the leadership role in pulling this together. I think it's really, really important, and I would not want something done quickly and haphazardly. I'm sure that wouldn't happen, but I think that there is, given the current climate, that there is a danger in people responding without fully thinking through what it is they are doing. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, points well taken. It is it's new to a lot of people, and and even though you think you might know exactly what should be in there, it's going to be quite specific, and I don't know, it's going to be complicated, but I'm happy to leave Liam with it and see what he can do with it. Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe a bit of direction from Liam. Liam, I'm struggling a bit with the start of the recommendation that council directs staff to prepare a policy to address equity, inclusion, and anti-racism within Bowen municipality. I'm wondering, other municipalities having a document about respectfulness in the workplace, how citizens can expect to be treated, how staff can expect to be treated, vice versa. I don't want that the initial line to be too limiting with specific anti-racism. There's lots of issues going on there. Do you have any recommendations on potentially making sure that that is broad enough of a framework that we can work within a policy?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that what we would need to develop is, and like using the word inclusion that's in the recommendation, is this has to be inclusive of as many considerations that are conceivable at this time. So that needs not be limited to anti-racism, but to be fully inclusive of all of the different types of concerns that we might have as an employer, as public servants, as colleagues and community, and working together. And so I think it is important in this current context to really specifically identify anti-racism, given the issues that are going on with it being so acute and systemic, because it is, and it's not, no community is immune to it. So I think we want to make sure we've got something that is broad and all-encompassing to include gender equity, all of those different issues. But we also want to be able to pinpoint and specifically target some of the issues that we're trying to become more aware of and better at becoming better citizens, really.
Here.
I mean, yeah, Gary, just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the challenges I'm having is what are we putting certain issues front and center because they're timely right now. I mean, this will be a long-term living document that we can use going down the road. So I guess for me, I would have liked to see, and I'll go with this, but the initial wording, I would have just liked to see not have specifics like the anti-racism, for instance, in there. We don't have, we don't have the gender inclusion. We don't have, LGBTQ stuff in there. To leave it more of a general, what people can expect as far as treatment within our municipality, what's acceptable, what's not, but not point out specific areas as a focus. I'm thinking more general, all these issues are important, whether it's racism, LGBTQ, gender issues, whatever it may be, not to put certain ones above other ones and make it a policy just about that. So, I mean, I'm willing to go with this. That's my only comment. I thought that the initial line could be a bit more general just on how people feel treated. But, if you're willing to go with this, I'm okay with that as well.
Well, thank you. And that's a good point, Rob. I think it's up to Liam if that's okay for him. He's going to take the lead on it. And I think he understands the direction we have to go. So we just need someone to point us in the right direction is what I'm thinking right now. Allison?
Well, you could change, I sent around an email to everybody with the draft wording that I was proposing, which just turns a few words around. You could say address items such as diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism. And to me, Rob, inclusion means gender equity, gender neutrality issues, handicap, disabilities, mentally challenged people, everything else. And diversity is the whole range of everything. So, and if you wanted to,
I like that.
Okay, so address
if people are good with that,
items such as in front of diversity.
Yeah.
Should I read it out in its entirety, Councillor Morris?
Good idea.
The council directs staff prepare a Bowen Island municipality policy to address items such as diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism, and to recommend specific next step actions to respond to the renewed sense of urgency to address systemic racism.
And can I?
Okay with that. Yeah. Okay, Liam?
Not to be picky, but I'm just wondering about, so addressing diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism is good. And in that, we will hopefully get to equity and equality. But I would think it'd be good to see the word equity in there.
Yes,
I
please.
thought we had it in there.
I was
think we left
suggesting
it
we
in.
call it an equity policy.
Oh,
I'd like to have the word right in there too. Myself.
Oh, I
So
thought-
do you want to insert that after Bowen Island Municipality and have it be an equity policy to address items such as, or include equity as an item such as?
To me,
It just
addressing those
include-
three addresses equity, but
I would just add it as a fourth item. So to address equity, diversity, inclusion,
Okay,
anti-racism.
perfect.
okay.
Could I just confirm, what happened to Bowen Island Municipality there?
It's in there.
It's in there.
Beginning.
It just came first, that's all, instead of second.
Okay. And by that, we mean the corporate body of Bowen Island Municipality.
Well, we can't direct the public.
Well, exactly. So I think that there needs to be clarity around that. And I
Well,
think
that's-
clarity around this group, but
Well, that's why I suggested we call it a Bowen Island municipality policy, which means
Yeah.
it's the corporate body.
Yes. Yeah. Good call.
It's a policy that will help govern how we conduct business. The sort of core-based principles on how we expect our staff and counselors to be treated, and how we will treat each other and those that we serve. And something that we can point to new staff, and we can also point to the public as well. But we can't direct the public and say, thou shalt adhere to
No.
this.
Has it been seconded?
No, not
I'll
moved or
second it.
seconded. Not
Okay,
been
so-
If it's been moved, I'll move it.
And I'll second it.
perfect.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? And we're happy with the wording, I think. Does anybody want to hear it again? Okay, I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye.
I
Rob, there he goes. All right. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to reports of committees, commissions, Councillor Hawking and Nicholson, recommendations from the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee meeting held June 16th, 2020. Go ahead.
Sure, I'll start if you want, Maureen. I managed to get my mic unmuted first, I suppose. I'll talk about the first one. So we had these grants, these CARP grants. Everybody knows what those are, I guess, that we get from the provincial government. We had given a grant to produce some videos for the money from 2018. We ended up getting that money back because it became too difficult to produce them. So really, this is looking to some money that we had earlier on. So we had a presentation at our last meeting a few weeks ago by the, let's see, the name is the Sea Change Marine Conservation Society, and they've been doing work on the Salish Sea Nearshore Habitat Recovery Project, which is a 5-year habitat restoration that involves an array of things, cleanups, but also the planting eelgrass, transplanting eelgrass. And one of the areas that they're focusing on is Mannion Bay. And so this is a proposal that they are going to work on that. They've actually got some funds to do it. The $2,000 would help with this, but it would also provide some communications, particularly around the mooring buoys. So you probably have all heard about these mooring buoys that can have, instead of having a chain that drags around on the bottom and damages the eelgrass, there's a sort of a mid-level buoy that holds that chain up off the ground, or off the bottom of the ocean, so it doesn't damage the eelgrass. So they would work with 6 people who would volunteer to have this work done, their buoys replaced with these new, more environmentally friendly buoys, and then they would produce some videos about it so that other people could learn what these, how these buoys would help protect the eelgrass and the importance of eelgrass. So that's what, it was a very good presentation. We all thought it was really good work. And so we thought that this was a very good way to spend that grant that was returned to us. Anything to add, Maureen, do you think on that?
no, It was a great presentation. They were very convincing, and they also have a track record.
Yeah, they've been working on this for years, and it's not just on Bowen, it's around Howe Sound. Actually, I shouldn't say it's around Howe Sound. It's around the Salish Sea, so in the Gulf Islands, up the Seashell Inlet, and here in Howe Sound as well. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to read that recommendation, David?
Sure, I
Or-
will. I just have to get my document open. The council directs staff to allocate the 2018 Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program, CARIP, fund of $2,000 to the eelgrass restoration and midline mooring buoy initiatives being conducted by the Sea Change Marine Conservation Society, including $1,500 to produce a public education video.
All
Second.
right. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor on this one? Aye.
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 Okay.
All right.
I think we got them all. Want to go and the next part of the recommendation?
Yeah, so Maureen, do you want to do this one or?
Sure. This actually springs from some correspondence from Councillor Fast, asking whether, well, I think I've got this straight, whether we would consider as a municipality including in our annual report and in our financial statement some reference to natural assets. We have, in our discussions around asset management, always sort of put off until the asset management plan is complete any detailed consideration of natural assets and their contribution to municipal infrastructure. But basically, Sue Ellen's correspondence prompted, the discussion of, well, why do we have to wait? Why can't there, at least in the interim, be a mention in our official documentation that natural assets are contributing economically and in other ways to Bowen Island? That's about it.
Yeah, well said.
All right. Any discussion on that?
Michael's got his hand up.
Sorry. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I just got what within this context, what is the definition of natural assets?
Trees, water.
Oh, let's let Liam answer. He put his hand up. Go, Liam.
So it's any naturally occurring asset that is providing benefit to community services. And generally it's understood that that service would otherwise be provided by conventional infrastructure. So it's one of the easiest ones to think of is like a wetland or a watershed that is providing you with clean drinking water. So, or a fancy term for a ditch, which people would say, a bioswale. And so rather than putting in enclosed storm drain systems, you might put in more wetland retention or ponds, things like that.
Yeah. And Michael, this is not at all sort of out there. Gibson's has been including such statements in its annual reports for some time, and so does West Vancouver.
Okay, so can they kind of put and I'm not being pedantic, but just please, do you kind of put dare I say, do you put a dollar figure to this, saying because of this natural asset, their contribution to the infrastructure, is it rated? I can see that it can be said to achieve something, but does it say that it has made this saving or it has saved another project? Is it quantified in some way?
I could answer that. There is a lot of work that's being done in Canada and internationally on quantifying it. But and we are hoping that in doing our asset management work, we will look at the opportunities to do that. But this note would not be putting a specific quantity and saying it's worth this much money. Rather, it would be a note in the financial statements that just says that we recognize that natural assets have this value, and probably say something like we're doing some work in getting a better understanding of that.
Okay, it's a statement of value and what it's achieving, rather than sort of making a demand or a specific response. Or it's to note that
There's no money value.
Actually, West Vancouver went through an extensive exercise working with a consultant where they did attribute a value to their assets, and they actually attributed how it was saving money. I mean, I haven't gone into detail in their reports, but how they could avoid built up infrastructure. And they are looking at, currently PSAB doesn't recognize and allow you to recognize that value in your statements. However, there is work underway to, I guess, get asset values recognized in the financial statements in the future. So it's with our current, it's easy to put a statement to recognize the value of those assets, but given our resources and given our current basically funding that we currently have, I mean, we don't have the resources to do an exercise of the extent of what West Vancouver did at this present time. However, we can look into dedicating resources to that and what the implications of that be should council desire to move in that direction. I mean, many municipalities are moving in that direction, but you do need resources or consultants to help you get there. We in-house do not have the resources to be able to do that.
Right. Okay.
Gary?
Allison,
Yeah.
I sent around the note that's in Gibson's financial statements. It's in there. In all financial statements start off with a note that describes their significant accounting policies, and there's always one for how you account for your tangible capital assets. So they've added a paragraph at the bottom of that note to talk about the value but it's intrinsic, not quantified, to them of things, some of the things that they have been dealing with their natural assets. So that would be the sort of note that would have to be worked on. And I'm assuming BDOs, they do, I think BDO does Gibson's, so they'd be okay with it. I don't know. So I'm okay with the resolution, but what I wanted to suggest was just so we don't get into a problem and end up with qualified financial statements, because we've insisted on putting in a note that the auditors won't accept, that we change the word include to consider. I can't think that we won't have a problem, but I don't want to end up with a qualified statement.
Well, like it says, for example, a note disclosure on the Bowen Island municipality, which is what they did at Gibson's, I guess.
Yeah, but what they've done in Gibson's is quite a, I can't see the auditors having a problem with that. No.
I'm just worried about if you try to get a monetary value in there, that's going to be.
No, we can't put a monetary value. I mean, that's PSAB studying. So a note in the tangible capital assets significant accounting policy sections would probably be fine. So all I'm saying is if we put in the words, right now it says include a reference to natural assets and their contribution to the infrastructure of Bowen Island as a note disclosure. So I'm just saying, just change the word include to consider, just so that if we ended up with an argument with the auditors, notes are an integral part of the financial statement, so the auditors have to agree with them.
Right. I think it could say consider including.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Direct staff to consider including a reference to natural assets and their contribution to the infrastructure of Bowen Island. For example, a note disclosure in the Bowen Island Municipality 2020 financial statements and 2020 annual report. So moved.
Okay, if you're
second.
Yeah, thank you, Sue Ellen. And if you're all good with that, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Good.
All right. We're going to move on to new business. Metrovan Director David Hawking.
Okay, thanks, Gary. couple of things. I sent everybody one of the things that came up was a letter to the Prime Minister about keeping the border closed. And I sent that letter to everybody a day or two ago. Another thing was what I've already talked about, those discussion forums on institutional racism. A third is I sent everybody a couple of weeks ago a note about the major capital projects, especially in water and sewer and some other things for Metro Vancouver. There's now an expanded version of that that is part of the relationship building with the provincial and federal governments, looking at the major capital projects that are underway or planned for Metro Vancouver and how they contribute to both the quality of life for the region, but also the economy of the region. So I'm going to, I've now got actually a copy of that. It just got approved. And so I'll send that to everybody so you can have a look at it. It's really quite interesting reading. Some of the projects are enormous. Some of the projects are really quite amazing. Tertiary treatment for all of the sewage plants. Anyway, it's worth having a look at. And if you have any questions, of course, you can direct them to me and I direct them to Metro Vancouver. So I'll send that to everybody tomorrow.
Thank you, David.
That's it for me, I think.
Okay, Islands Trust Municipal Trustees, Fast and Kale. Update, please.
I have a couple of things.
Okay.
Would you like me to go ahead? In 12.3 in your package, under info items, there's a number of things. I'll just whip through them here. The first one is contiguous forest mapping. So this is a bunch of new maps based on forest stand quality. And I don't know if you can see there, sorry, but anyway, there's
yeah, we can see it.
They're rated in first, second, and third kind of level of how important they are. Bowen is used as an example of keeping contiguous forest stands connected. So you'll see that on page 20 of the report, but it's an Islands Trust Conservancy and Islands Trust area. Anyway, it's another tool to use in conservation planning. And so that's in your package. Look on page 20 to see Bowen Island recognized there for the work we've done already in connectivity. The second thing I wanted to bring forward is 12.3b is the legislative monitoring report. Sounds really boring, but that's where Islands Trust is highlighting legislation, provincial legislation and federal legislation that's changing, that might influence us. For example, on pages 6 and 7, you'll see the changes to the agricultural land reserve that I was referring to earlier. So there's interesting stuff in there. C is a news release about COVID and traveling to the islands. And D is the Islands Trust Conservancy quarterly report, I guess it is. I'm a vice chair of that. The report is there. And it refers to a couple of to different work that the Islands Trust Conservancy is doing, including monitoring. So now that we're at stage 3 of the BC Restart Plan, Islands Trust staff are Conservancy staff are starting to come around to the islands to monitor the nature reserves and conservation covenants that they have on Bowen Island and the other islands. And there's more in that report if you're interested. Tomorrow is a meeting of the Islands Trust Conservancy in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I continue as the liaison meeting with the Executive Committee of the Islands Trust and the Islands Trust Conservancy. These are the two arms of the Islands Trust. We'll meet together and coordinate our activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue-Ellen. Michael, anything to add?
Yeah, no, just to say I've had a couple of calls, believe it or not, on short-term vacation rentals, because you can appreciate that this issue affects all the islands in all the Gulf Islands. And of course, for every one of them, the solution is individual. There is no one size fits all t-shirts here. I explained where we're at, and I rather think that come September, if there is any clear picture emerging, when we get back to meeting in September, which will be a Zoom meeting, I think, I'm sure it will be, this subject will probably be on the drawing boards for 2021, because we really are policy-less. I described us as a rudderless ship here. in direction of tourism. And it's interesting, it has such a massive effect on all the islands. And yet really, it's been one of these issues that's been left almost to fend for itself where some of these regulations are concerned. So obviously more to follow, but it will be an active subject of conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And Maureen, update the council on the Metro Van Regional Parks Committee.
Thank you, Gary. I circulated earlier today a report that I had promised earlier on nature and ecosystems, which is part of the discussion papers around the Climate 2050 project. So take a look at it. It's an interesting report. Our next parks meeting is on Wednesday, and there were 2 items on the open agenda that will have some relevance for Bowen. The first is the draft regional greenways plan, looking at connectivity of trails throughout the metro region. And the second one is what's called the State of the Assets Report for Buildings. And it's an overview of all of the buildings located in metro parks. And by buildings, they mean everything from, you know, a full-scale heritage house that's used for large wedding parties to and Crippen Park is identified somewhat remarkably as having 21 buildings associated with it. So that's surprising. Anyway, this is all coming up on Wednesday. I'll know more about what's involved, and we'll report back at the next meeting.
All right, thank you, Maureen. And Allison, update on the TransLink Mayor's Council meetings.
Well, I better put my mask on to ride on the bus.
Good.
That's a big push of the campaign right now, is with more people getting on transit, is to ride on the bus. The last meeting was June the 25th, and interesting discussion on just long-term planning coming out of COVID, the impact, and you know, we're I think on track with, they were planning on a sort of a July opening with phase 3, and that's what's happened. But there's so many ifs. How many people are going to come back? How many people are going to be too scared to ride the bus? And on it goes. And there's been a submission made to the on the BC budget submissions, and we're going to hear on the provincial budget tomorrow and where they're at, and it's probably going to be as dismal as the federal one was. So I don't know where all the money's going to come from to help out everybody. We had a very good presentation on reallocating road space. And one of the interesting things is, if you're going to reallocate an MRN road and take away a travel lane, then you do have to discuss it with TransLink. And then the other is pushing for GHG emission targets for the ride-hailing vehicles. Right now, they're not being required to do anything or have electric vehicles and that kind of thing. So all those were good. And then the last is there's one vacant position coming up to be filled in the December meeting for the TransLink board, because the Mayor's Council appoints the members to the TransLink board, or most of them. And so there's one position coming up. The ad's just been posted. So if you know of any qualified people, they're looking for somebody with broad business background and experience in the industry. And in the summary, it's interesting. TransLink's workforce is 8,300 people and $2 billion in revenues pre-COVID-19. So it's one of the largest entities in the province, business entities. So I think that's it.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. The link to the actual agenda package and the presentations was in the last agenda.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Okay, we'll move on to section 11, which is the items removed from the consent agenda. We covered that. The information items, we're going to go right down to question period. And I don't see anybody in there
Ron
to
was
ask
here.
any questions. Huh?
Ron
Is she?
was on.
Yeah,
I'm
she's, oh, she is here?
Yeah.
I checked and I didn't see her there.
I came on late.
Yes. Okay. Are you, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So the referendum on
Yes.
September 12th,
Yes.
with COVID and I mean, we don't know what COVID will look like then, but have there
No.
been considerations for what happens, you know, if it's like today or, you know, as COVID is today, or if we're in the second wave by that point?
That's a good question. Is
Want me
Shauna
to
still
answer
there?
that? Shauna's not here, but
Oh.
I'm
Yeah,
sure I
go
can
ahead,
speak.
Hope.
Or
Yeah.
Liam, you can jump in if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead, Hope, and I can chime in.
Yeah, just we have given some consideration to that and how that would look, and if the second wave does come, we would encourage probably really encourage mail ballot voting and make that a large window. Otherwise, we would do it in person and just limit one and just have physical distancing in place as well. So that's pretty much how we would go about it, and we would have it in a smaller venue like Municipal Hall or rent the gymnasium at Bix. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Sort of a wait and see and have a
Yeah.
backup plan in place.
Is there, I mean, if we're at another point of lockdown, is there a certain point where you could cancel or move the referendum if that was a thing, or is that?
Well, the legislation states that we're required to hold the referendum or the assent voting within 80 days of the statutory approval from the Inspector of Municipalities. So we would need to
Yeah,
better answer that question.
as a past deputy inspector, I think if Bronwyn, if we move to, if there's another huge spike and we cannot conceivably carry forward with an adequate referendum, then I'm sure there would be either leniency in the deadline for holding the referendum or the ability to extend it or withdraw and have the boring bylaw reapproved for another later referendum date. But Hope is exactly right. It's a bit of a wait and see, and we would develop a adequate safety plan for conducting any kind of voting, and have that posted publicly, and so people be aware of how it will be conducted.
Cool. That's my only question.
Okay, well, thank you, Bronwyn. They're good
Thanks.
questions. Yeah, it's kind of a wait and see, like day-to-day operation around here. Okay, and with that, on that happy note, we are going to adjourn the regular council meeting. Thank you, everybody. And we're going to reconvene for that closed meeting. Does the people want 5 minutes or?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and Hope, will you send me the link for the closed one like you did for the open?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So
It's
see you
20
guys at 9:20.
9:20 is a good time.
Okay.
See you then.
All right. All right. See you then.
Hope, is it a separate link or is it the same?
It is, yeah.
Okay, we'll go look for
It's
it.
in the closed agenda.